Welcome to our first of 3 public meetings where will be accepting public comment on the proposed withdrawal for the Superior National Forest. I'm Rachel Wooten with BLM Utah, and I'll be facilitating our meeting today. We are hosting this meeting using the Zoom for Government platform. Your camera is off and your microphone is muted. Next slide, please. Great. Please use your audio settings button here on Zoom or your volume on your computer to adjust meeting audio. You can test your microphone in audio settings before it is your turn to comment. Closed captioning will be available for this meeting. Please select the closed captioning button on the bottom of your screen if you would like closed captions. You can also turn off the closed captions if you change your mind. Now we'll go over some of the public comment period guidelines and expectations. We'll go into more details as we get into the public comment period later on, but we wanted to cover the basics at the beginning. First is respect other points of view, other commenters, and agency staff. We thank you all for your interest and appreciate you being here today. Please help other attendees in our panel feel welcome and safe in sharing information and their perspectives with us all. Do not use offensive language or threaten anyone. Topics covered in this meeting can be personal, and we understand that they may be emotional. Next, for our call-in listeners, once it's your turn to comment, you can press *9 to raise your virtual hand and *6 to unmute. Number 3. If public comments are completed prior to the end of the meeting time, we'll end the meeting early, but leave a slide up with resources about joining the next meeting and how to comment in writing. Before we begin, I'll take a few minutes to introduce our agency staff that will be listening to your comments and helping with the meeting today. Leah Baker, Associate Director, BLM Eastern States. Hi, Leah. Stephanie Carmen, District Manager, Northeastern States District Office. Connie Cummins, Forest Supervisor, Superior National Forest. Sheree Hamilton, Deputy Regional Forester, Eastern Region. Hello, everyone. Dave Radford, Deputy State Director, Geospatial Services, BLM Eastern States. Shannon Reishi, Deputy Forest Supervisor, Superior National Forests. Carly Urick, Project Manager, BLM Eastern States. Great. And now I'll turn it over to Dave. Dave, would you like to get us started with some opening remarks?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Radford, BLM Eastern States Deputy State Director of Geospatial Services. Welcome to the first public meeting to focus on the U.S. Forest Service's application to withdraw Superior National Forest lands in northeastern Minnesota from mineral and geothermal leasing, subject to valid existing rights. The Forest Service is a surface management agency for these lands, and the BLM manages the subsurface mineral estate. We will go into a little more detail in a presentation that will be delivered to you here in a bit, but on October 21st, the BLM published a notice in the Federal Register announcing our receipt of the Forest Service application and initiating a 2-year segregation on those lands, as well as a 90-day public comment period on proposed withdrawal. Since the October announcement, the BLM has been receiving public comments through both email and traditional mail. We are at the tail end of the public comment period, which closes on January 19th. Verbal comments shared today will become part of the official record. For those of you who are not able to provide comments verbally today, you can still submit comments to us via mail and email. Thank you for your participation and for your interest in public lands. Your knowledge of the area and your input are vital for informing a decision on the Forest Service's application. And with that, I will turn it over to Connie.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Connie Cummins, and I'm the Forest Supervisor for the Superior National Forest. The Forest Service is the agency responsible for managing the land and waters on the surface of Superior National Forest. I want to thank all of you for joining this listening session, which is designed to really better understand your perspectives and issues associated with the Forest Service application for withdrawal of approximately 225,000 acres of federally owned minerals in the Rainy River watershed on the Superior National Forest from operation under the mineral and geothermal leasing laws. This withdrawal would prevent the Bureau of Land Management from issuing new prospecting permits or leases for an initial term of 20 years. We applied for this withdrawal because of unanswered questions surrounding copper and nickel mining and sulfide mineral deposits and potential impacts to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. So today we're here to listen to you as we continue working through this environmental analysis that will accompany our application. We want to ensure we are considering all public comments and concerns. So thank you again for taking the time out of your day to be here, and we look forward to hearing from you.
As previously stated, we're here today because last October, the Forest Service submitted an application to the Bureau of Land Management, also known as the BLM, for a withdrawal of approximately 225,000 acres of federally owned minerals in the Rainy River watershed on the Superior National Forest from deposition under mineral and geothermal leasing laws, subject to valid existing rights. This is a joint public meeting hosted by the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. The Forest Service is here as an agency charged with managing the lands and waters on the surface of the Superior National Forest. The BLM is here as the agency charged with management responsibilities for the federally owned minerals affected by the proposed withdrawal. Today's meeting will be recorded and a transcript will be prepared. Our focus today is to listen to your comments, which will be used as the Forest Service performs an environmental analysis. We will not have a question and answer session today to give more time for insight and to listen to your insight, views, and perspectives. In addition to these public comments, written comments will continue to be accepted until January 19th, 2022. That means they need to be submitted via email before January 20th, 2022, or be postmarked on or before January 19th. Verbal and written comments will be considered equally. The email address and mailing information are up on the screen, and we'll be sharing this information later in the meeting as well. For those joining by phone, the email address for comments is BLM_es_lands@blm.gov. The mailing address is F. David Radford, BLM Eastern States Office, 5275 Leesburg Pike, Falls Church, Virginia, 22041. You can find more information on the project and about commenting in the quick link section on the right-hand side of the Superior National Forest homepage. And that web address is fs.usda.gov/main/superior/home. And you'll also find that. We'll also share that information later too, and it'll be in your chat. I'm going to ask Connie Cummins to join us and give an overview of the proposed withdrawal. But before I do, I realized I think I forgot to introduce myself. My name's Rachel. I'll be your moderator, and I'll be here throughout the meeting. Thanks, Connie.
Hey, thanks, Rachel. So I want to start off by providing a quick overview of what's being proposed. So the Forest Service is requesting the withdrawal because, again, we believe there are unanswered questions surrounding copper, nickel mining, and sulfide mineral deposits, and the potential impacts to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness and its watershed. These potential impacts include contamination from acid mine drainage, seepage of tailings water, tailing basins failures, and waste rock treatment locations. The withdrawal application area is in the northeastern Arrowhead region of Minnesota, and it's entirely on the Superior National Forest and it's within the headwaters of the Rainy River watershed. The proposed mineral withdrawal would only affect future development of federally managed hard rock minerals. It would not affect access to private lands, timber harvest, recreational access, or motorized use, and it would not prevent all mining in the area. The proposed withdrawal does not affect valid existing federal mineral rights as determined by the Bureau of Land Management. Private lands, private mineral states, private fractional minerals interest, or certain mineral materials, including sand, gravel, or stone quarries, are not affected. Private state mineral interests could continue to pursue mineral exploration and development within the within the area during the 20-year term. Carly's going to give us an overview of the process for the withdrawal.
Thank you, Connie. Hello, everyone. I'm Carly Urick. I'm a project manager for BLM Eastern States. In September 2021, the Forest Service submitted an application to the Bureau of Land Management for a withdrawal of approximately 225,000 acres of federally owned minerals. As Connie stated earlier, this proposed withdrawal is in the Rainy River watershed on the Superior National Forest. On October 21st, 2021, the BLM published a notice in the Federal Register announcing its acceptance of the withdrawal application from the Forest Service. This notice initiated a 90-day public comment period on the proposed withdrawal and, at the same time, initiated a 2-year segregation period that temporarily prohibits the BLM from issuing new federal mineral prospecting permits or lease applications in the withdrawal area. We're currently in that segregation period, during which the BLM and the Forest Service are seeking public comments and completing the necessary studies, analyses, and reports. After the public comment period closes on January 19th, the Forest Service will compile the environmental assessment and other supporting documents. Based on the Forest Service's findings, the BLM will make a recommendation to the Secretary of the Interior, who will ultimately make the final decision on the Forest Service's withdrawal application. After the findings of the environmental analysis, the recommendation and additional information and records are submitted to the Secretary of the Interior. The Secretary will make a decision to either reject the application or accept the application and put in place a withdrawal. If the application is rejected by the Secretary of the Interior, federal agencies could consider applications for exploration under prospecting permits. If the application is accepted by the Secretary of the Interior and a withdrawal is put in place, federal land would not be open to new applications or activities that use or access federal minerals or geothermal resources. Valid existing rights would not be affected by a withdrawal, however. Determining if something falls under valid existing rights involves a case-by-case determination, looking into the details of each case. The BLM will not be prejudging those determinations at this time. The initial term of a withdrawal may last up to 20 years. Under both scenarios, mining activities on private and state lands would not be affected. Although we have varying responsibilities, the BLM and Forest Service work closely to share information and expertise in order to provide the best services to the public. We will work as cooperating agencies throughout the process of the environmental analysis of the proposed withdrawal. Connie will cover the types of comments that are most helpful to our analysis and decision process.
So now that the withdrawal application has been submitted, we have an opportunity to continue compiling information and completing the environmental analysis that was started in 2017. When the mineral withdrawal was first proposed, we, the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, held 3 public meetings in 2017 and received more than 90,000 public comments during the comment period. We will include those comments received during the 2017 and 2018 comment periods as we continue to complete the environmental assessment in 2022. So if you've already submitted a comment and your comment has not changed, there's no need to resubmit it. As we continue our environmental analysis process, we're asking for your feedback to help us shape the analysis. Our final recommendation will use the best available science while incorporating the important and diverse concerns people have for maintaining their way of life, the protection of natural resources and wilderness values, and the economic vitality of the communities most directly affected by the proposed withdrawal. We look forward to hearing to your perspectives regarding these important topics. The proposed withdrawal may also raise economic concerns. We acknowledge both the importance of domestic mineral production to the nation and the need to protect our valuable water resources and recreational tourism surrounding one of the most visited wilderness areas in the country. We're sensitive to those concerns and wish to be respectful to everyone concerned as we work through this analysis. This is a listening session. We'll be focusing on your comments today. We're not going to be taking questions, so we can hear from as many of you as we possibly can. More information is available regarding the project on our project website, and that may help answer some of the questions that you may have.
Thank you, Connie. And thank you to all of you for registering to participate in our Zoom meeting today. There were a lot of people interested in giving verbal comments. To keep the process as equitable as possible, everyone who was registered to speak was entered into a random lottery drawing. Speakers were notified with their place in line to speak with an email sent yesterday. To keep everyone together as we move through commenters, we will display on screen and also announce the names of 5 speakers at a time. Please be ready to speak if you see your name on the list or hear it called by our facilitator. When your name is announced, please raise your hand to make it easy for our Zoom technicians to find you in the participants list and unmute you when it is your turn. If you're called to speak, you will have up to 3 minutes to provide comment. A virtual timer will be shown on screen and will start when you begin speaking. If, after 30 seconds of calling out a name, the speaker does not begin providing their comment, we'll move on to the next name in the list. If a speaker is not present or are not ready to speak when called, we'll move to the next person on the list. If a speaker is disrespectful or inappropriate, the agencies reserve the right to mute the speaker and move to the next person in the list. If you finish your comment prior to the 3 minutes allotted, we will move to the next person on the list. If a person has been picked but decides that they do not wish to speak, they may pass and will move to the next person on the list. The option to cede time and grant it to another individual will not be available for this meeting. Although we cannot guarantee that every person who indicated they would like time to speak will be able to speak, we hope to get through as many names as possible. If you are not called on to speak during this meeting, you may register for a subsequent meeting to speak. The same lottery-based random selection will occur for all meetings. As a reminder, any member of the public may submit written comments. Both written and verbal comments are considered equally. Thank you to all of you for attending and for your patience as we work through our list of speakers.
Thanks, Carly. And thanks so much for that overview. We'll now begin our listening session. Again, I'll share that closed captioning is available for this meeting. Please select the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to see them. You can also turn off the closed captions if you change your mind. We have 6 panelists listening from 2 federal agencies today. Audience members will only see 2 of them on the screen at the time, although all the panelists will be listening to your comments throughout the meeting. As Carly said, each speaker will have up to 3 minutes, and the timer will be shown on your screen and will count down from 3 minutes. It will begin flashing when there are 30 seconds left in a speaker's allotted time. If you are calling in and cannot see the screen, I will announce that you have 30 seconds left. So our first 2 panelists who will join me on the screen are Connie Cummins and Stephanie Carmen. Hi, folks. And let's go to our first 5 commenters. So the next slide. Our first 5 commenters should appear on the screen. I will call our first name now. Please raise your hand to help us locate you in the virtual meeting room and assist you in getting your microphone unmuted. Andrea Zapanic is our first speaker. So Andrea, if you've joined us today, please raise your hand. And since we've called Andrea, go ahead and start our timer for 30 seconds, please. Andrea, if you're calling in by phone, please *9 to raise your hand, and then you'll be able to unmute yourself by *6. All right, it's been 30 seconds. Next, we'll go to Brian Mclean. Brian, go ahead and begin your comments.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thanks, Brian.
My name is Brian Mclean. I live in West Des Moines, Iowa. I strongly support the proposed mineral and geothermal leasing withdrawal in the Superior National Forest. I strongly want to see the boundary water canoe area wilderness protected from the threat of copper ore mining in the Rainy River watershed. I believe this ban should be permanent. My involvement with the boundary waters goes back over 50 years when I spent my first time 2 weeks canoeing as a Boy Scout, fishing and camping in the boundary waters. I've also been able to spend time with my father canoeing in that area. So my main interest is that of interest in the wilderness and protecting the pristine waters and beauty of the boundary waters area. I think the nature of the low-grade mineralizations in the zone under the watershed would require large amounts of tailings and storage stockpiles, and there's no foolproof way to assure the resulting sulfuric acid runoff will not create irreversible damage to the boundary waters. I've seen the copper mines in the arid climate of Arizona, and they're massive and not pretty, and it is horrifying to imagine such environmentally risky activities in the Rainy River headwaters and in such a wet environment, and the potential damage to the ecosystem is just far too great. History does provide the basis for concern and the belief that mining activities have a high likelihood of damaging the environment. The local economy, outfitters, guides that support the travel and adventures, such as people, myself and my friends, surely would be negatively impacted if such an occurrence were to happen of pollution of the water, and being able to catch fish and eat those fish in the boundary waters without concern of the pollution from the sulfide or copper mine is a big reason by itself for a permanent ban on the mining activity. So again, I strongly support the effort and the application on the proposed mineral and geothermal leasing withdrawal in the Superior National Forest. And thank you for the time.
Thank you, Brian. Our next commenter is Joe Fowler. Joe, sorry, you should be able to unmute yourself and begin your comments.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, thanks.
My name is Joe Fowler. I'm a board member of Jobs for Minnesotans. I'm also the president of the Minnesota State Building and Construction Trades Council, representing more than 70,000 union and organized construction workers in Minnesota. And I'm also the business manager of Laborers Local 563, representing more than 10,000 skilled union laborers within the state. I, along with several of my friends, own some property in northern Minnesota. We own that property exclusively for recreation because we are avid outdoorsmen. Our wives are avid outdoors women, hunting, fishing, and enjoying all that nature has to offer. I absolutely like clean water and fertile soil as well. But in Minnesota, this withdrawal or proposed withdrawal, I think would have dramatic effects on the economy in northern Minnesota, the potential economic output in northern Minnesota, the job creation of good middle-class jobs that have family sustaining wages, benefits, retirements, and health and welfare. And I think there is also, as the previous commenter had said, a history shown that we can mine safely in Minnesota. I don't believe that this proposal is necessarily science-based. I believe if you want a science-based approach, there is an EIS that has been sitting on the desk of the BLM and the DNR for nearly 2 years that maybe would be brought to the forefront, and that would offer a true full environmental impact study on the economics and how it affects the environment in that area. And I think you guys should be looking at doing that and moving that forward and following that process instead of this one, which could cause delays in what is a science-based proposal and a process that has been established for a very long time. We have generations of miners within our organized industries and the unions that have done this safely for over 100 years. And I think even the president has stated that in some form or another, that there's a realization that we need to increase production of these critical and rare earth minerals like cobalt, nickel, and copper. And we have the ability to do that safely here in Minnesota. Without doing that, what we'll end up doing is increasing our dependence on countries like China and Russia, who end up mining out of the Congo, where we have very little workplace protections, human right protections, and things of that nature. Everybody who's on this webcast right now is using a computer that needs some of these rare earth minerals. So when people say they want to go to an electrified vehicles with EVs, the batteries need the nickel. When you need wind farms and renewable energy, those generators are made of copper, tons and tons of copper. And we cannot recycle ourselves out of this situation. We can build it.
Thank you so much. Our next two commenters will be Lucas Leaf and Scott Mills. Lucas, please unmute yourself.
My name is Lucas Leaf, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Boundary Waters this afternoon. I've been taking trips into the BWCA for the better part of my life, which has given me the opportunity to experience one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen countless times over. My relationship with the Boundary Waters began when I was 12 years old during my first fishing trip with my dad. It was chock full of everything a spring fishing opener trip can throw at you: amazing fish, freezing rain, high winds, sunny days, a snowstorm, campfires, lessons in safety and stewardship principles, being wet and miserable, and so much more. And I loved it. It was a trip that would solidify my connection to the outdoors for the rest of my life. Aside from my personal experiences with the BWCA, I am also the executive director of Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters. Founded in 2015, Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters was established as a hunting and angling voice for protecting the BWCA from proposed sulfide ore copper mining in its watershed. Since its inception, Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters has worked to protect the land, water, and wildlife that makes the BWCA an iconic place to hunt, fish, paddle, camp, and explore. The Boundary Waters represent some of America's most accessible public lands and waters. Hunters and anglers travel to the BWCA for a one-of-a-kind chance to pursue lake trout, walleye, smallmouth bass, pike, white-tailed deer, rough grouse in a true backcountry landscape. The BWCA also allows for families of all backgrounds and children of any age to participate in a wilderness trip. Few other destinations allow for this unique special experience, and few places we have in America that provide the backdrop for this experience must have proper protections in place. Lodges, outfitters, guide services, local businesses, and so many more benefit from the clean water in the BWCA. Without steps forward to protect the BWCA from sulfide or copper mining, polluted water and its impacts on fish and wildlife would depress business around the BWCA and negatively impact the regional outdoor economy. We must work towards a positive outcome on behalf of this community, a community that values the priceless outdoor experiences that places like the BWCA provide, and for our future generations that deserve to experience these wild places as we have. The mineral withdrawal process allows for consideration of a 20-year ban on the development of sulfide or copper mining leases on federal public lands in the watershed of the BWCA. This process is overwhelmingly supported by Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters and our hunting and fishing community across the country. Spending time outdoors is what rejuvenates and energizes us. The importance of preserving places like the BWCA that provide that experience is immeasurable. Our adventures in nature are what inspire us to explore and what shape us into the diehard outdoor enthusiasts and conservationists that we are. I, for one, want very much for my little girls and for all future generations to have those same experiences. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next on our list is Scott Mills. And Scott, please feel free to raise your hand virtually.
Okay. I think I'm on, right?
You're on. Thanks, Scott.
Great. Thank you much. Thanks for listening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I know and respect many of the people that will share views different than mine that live in this community. I'm a fourth generation resident of Ely. The forest and lakes are why I live here. It is my home. I have spent most of my working career working in residential construction. This involves lake homes, woods homes, or homes in the woods rather, even if without lakeshore. And recently, in the last 3 years, I have retired from that. However, that provided basically unceasing work for 20 some years. And I know many other people have that same experience here in the area. I'm speaking, considering the threat to the boundary waters for the threat of the proposed sulfide ore mine is a threat to the wildness and the flora fauna of the area. As you know, it's a very popular wild wilderness area in the federal system. We see that every year. We had hardly any open hotel rooms this year. I'm going to get on to the main concern, the negative mining impacts that I hope you will consider and evaluate, is that sound carries for miles in this country. This operation will be up right next to the boundary waters. We'll even be able to hear it possibly in Ely when the wind is correct, either the fan house or other operations. The Harvard study showed under all scenarios they checked were negative for the local economy. Then the effects are out there. I hope you find that out in your study in the 20-year moratorium. I want to also say that the Superior National Forest was created as a reservoir for natural areas to replenish what we've lost in development. It is a resource that natural world, and we are currently facing a crisis where that natural world will be much higher value because of climate change. The ore from this mine will not have any effect on meeting climate.
Thank you so much, Scott. Now we will go on to our next 5 speakers. Our next 5 speakers, I'm going to announce your names. Please raise your hands. Chris Hill, Craig Oakson, Frank Ungaro, Donald Berry, and David Chura. Please go ahead and raise your hands. And Chris Hill, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
My name is Chris Hill. I am the president of Carpenters Local 361 in Hermantown, Minnesota. I am also the director of Northern Minnesota and North Dakota for the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters. We represent 28,000 carpenters, millwrights, pile drivers, floor coverers, cabinet makers, and other skilled professionals in the construction and wood products industry in Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, and Nebraska. Our members have a direct interest in this case because they work in industrial facilities, including the mines in northern Minnesota, the power plants that provide electricity to them, the manufacturing plants that supply them, that use their raw materials. We also install wind turbines in utility scale solar projects in other processing and manufacturing facilities that need locally produced sources for copper, nickel, cobalt, and other materials. Lastly, our members would build and maintain any facilities built for non-ferrous mining in Minnesota. As a 25-year member of the Carpenters, I am proud to speak in support of jobs for our area. A career in construction is made up of a variety of projects: ongoing maintenance, rehab, repair, new construction, as well as other work opportunities. The mining industry has been a way to make a good living for decades. I'm speaking in opposition to the Superior National Forest withdrawal application because of the devastating impact it would have for jobs in northern Minnesota. The withdrawal will mean no jobs, no possibility for economic opportunity, no hope for the entire industry with promising future for business to get off the ground. Careers will be cut short for workers. Furthermore, I am tired of outsiders meddling with our projects. We are passionate about our region because many of us have lived here for generations, cared for the water and the natural habitat. We have made a good living working in jobs like construction, mining, logging, and other industrial work. I also want to make sure that you understand the connection between mining and renewable energy, materials and minerals, and the demand that will be placed on these minerals. If we are going to have a green energy transformation in our country in the coming years, take wind, solar, renewable resources, and other ways to cut our carbon emissions, such as electric vehicles and infrastructure goes along with that, is important to us. All of that infrastructure will depend on materials we extract from the ground. We ask that you trust the science, listen to the experts, give us an opportunity to.
Thank you so much, Chris. Our next commenter is Craig Oakson. Craig, if you're on, please raise your hand. If you're joining by phone, select *9 and then *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. And we'll go ahead and start our timer. Okay, we'll go on to our next commenter, Frank Ungaro. Frank, if you're here, please raise your hand. And if you're joining by phone, *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Okay, we will go on to our next commenter. Our next commenter is Donald Berry. Donald, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Don Berry, and today I'm testifying strongly in favor of a mineral withdrawal banning mining in the Rainy River watershed next to the BWCA. Although I grew up in southern Wisconsin, my family has been deeply connected with the Boundary Waters for more than 65 years. My parents went on their first canoe trip into the BWCA in 1956, and they logged in more than 30 canoe trips to the area while they were still active and alive. Moreover, their love for the Boundary Waters was passed on to their 4 children as we were growing up. My parents read books to us by conservationists like Sigurd Olson, and our family hero was Bill Rahm, the sole outfitter at the time in Ely who actively supported wilderness for the BWCA. This love of wilderness is in my family's DNA. I have been on more than 20 canoe trips into the Boundary Waters myself, and my brother worked as a canoe guide out of the Boy Scout canoe base on Moose Lake. Although our collective days of portaging and camping are now over, our love of the BWCA is not. And my entire extended family will be returning to Ely next August for a reunion to honor my father, who died last month at 103, remaining to his last days a staunch defender of the Boundary Waters. I mention all of this because banning mining in the proximity to the Boundary Waters is not just an issue of local or even statewide concern, but rather an important conservation issue of national importance for the American people. Families across this country, like my own, have been financially supporting the recreational and tourism industries in northern Minnesota for decades, and will continue to do so and provide far more sustainable jobs to Minnesotans than destructive, polluting mining ever could. In opposing mining, I am not unfamiliar with the difficulty of having to make controversial public land management decisions. Having spent many years serving as the chief counsel for the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and 4 years as the Interior Department's assistant secretary overseeing the National Park Service and Fish and Wildlife Service. nor is this my first rodeo opposing destructive mining next to a national treasure. During my time at the Interior Department during the Clinton administration, we successfully blocked the huge proposed New World gold mine, which would have been built close to Yellowstone National Park. All told, I have spent 44 years in Washington, D.C. working on complicated public land management issues involving both BLM and the Forest Service. So I understand the difficult choices now before you. But when it comes to protecting the boundary waters from the likely disastrous effects of nearby mining, this is not even a close call. The BWCA is a priceless national treasure and should be protected from mining by both of your two agencies, period, full stop. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to share with you my views and thoughts today.
Thank you, Donald. Next, we'll go on to David Kira. David, you should be able to unmute now.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good afternoon. My name is David Chua, and I live in Duluth, Minnesota, and spend time in the BWCA. I work for Minnesota Power and serve on the board for Jobs for Minnesotans and Mining Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I oppose the proposal to withdraw 225,000 acres from future exploration and projects in Northeast Minnesota. As this nation moves forward in advancing clean energy, we must also take responsibility for our consumption. We should not be exporting our values and emissions elsewhere around the world. Instead, we should think globally, but consume locally. In Minnesota, we have the Duluth Complex, which can provide the copper, nickel, and other metals which clean energy demands. This resource provides us the opportunity to stop relying on imports from countries and to stop exporting the mining of these resources we all consume and increasingly demand to places where safety, environmental, and labor standards are weak and in some cases nearly non-existent. The domestic source of critical minerals is integral to achieving public policy initiatives. For example, the Biden administration's ambitious timetables to reach 50% vehicle electrification by 2030 and production of almost half of our nation's electricity from solar power by 2050. To reach these goals, it's imperative that domestic modern mining projects are advanced in order to produce the raw materials needed for EV production and clean energy technologies. Projects must be allowed to follow the established, transparent, predictable, and fair environmental review process currently in place after a company submits a formal project proposal. The established stringent regulatory process is the appropriate way to determine if a mining project can proceed. In Minnesota, a comprehensive science-based environmental review process is already underway. Twin Metals' proposed modern mining project has been under review since the company submitted its plan in late 2019. That regulatory process requires years of detailed scrutiny of their operational plans and potential impacts under multiple federal, tribal, and state government entities, in addition to several opportunities for public comment. As the grandson of an immigrant miner, I have witnessed firsthand the opportunities mining can provide. As the father of 2 kids, modern mining and exploration throughout the region offers Minnesotans a future of high-paying jobs and billions in investment and revenue. Further, it provides optimism for a bright future for our kids and billions of dollars in potential revenues to support their education and the state's K-12 education system. I encourage you to follow the process in place for project review and rescind the proposal to withdraw these acres from future leasing, exploration, and potential development. Let's trust the science. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, we'll move on to our next 5 speakers. I'll read the names now. Vincent Fusco, and please raise your hands. Alex Falconer, Cassandra Prins, Vasilakis, Omni Jawar, and Gary Groven. Please raise your hands now. If you're joining by phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute when it's your turn to speak. All right, Vincent will start our timer. All right, Alex Falconer, you're up next. Alex, you should be unmuted.
All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time. My name is Alex Falconer. I live in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. We also have a family cabin outside Ely, Minnesota on Farm Lake, which is on the path of pollution should the Twin Metals mine be built and pollute the headwaters of the boundary waters. Our drinking, cooking, and cleaning water comes directly from the lake, and we fear the day we'd have to filter out excess sulfates, methylated mercury, and other toxins that will pollute the water from this mine site. I strongly support the proposed mineral withdrawal to protect the watershed of the boundary waters canoe area wilderness. And the threats posed by sulfide copper mining are unjustifiable in the watershed of such a sensitive and important area. It isn't a matter of if, but when water pollution will occur and flow through the heart of the wilderness if this mine were to be built. I also want the boundary waters protected because I love the dark night sky. The boundary waters was recently named an International Dark Sky Sanctuary, one of only 14 in the world. This came after years of work and research conducted with the Forest Service. We need places where we can escape light pollution to see the Milky Way, northern lights, and meteor showers. In my spare time, I'm a night sky photographer. My pictures have been featured in organizations and the Weather Channel. I even saw prints in a small business. Sulfide copper mining in this area near the boundary waters would make taking photos at this level impossible. A massive sulfide copper mining district directly adjacent to the southern edge of the wilderness boundary would pollute the night sky with artificial lights. Dark skies are also important for migratory animals and birds who use the moon and stars to coordinate their journey across the continent. And the boundary waters is a major migratory pathway and flyway for an almost innumerable number of species, some of which are threatened or listed as endangered. During environmental review of the proposed withdrawal, please be sure to thoroughly address sulfide copper mining's potential negative effects to the dark sky of the boundary waters. I'm a father and I bring my 3 children to the wilderness regularly, as I did when I was a child. Having a quiet, unpolluted wilderness taught me valuable life lessons about self-reliance, independence, and inspired me to be interested in science and care for the world around me. If sulfide copper mining was allowed to happen in the same watershed as the boundary waters, my children would not have the benefit of drinking from a lake, eating fish they caught themselves, or seeing the northern lights without worrying about water, air, noise, or light pollution. I want my kids and all future generations to have the ability to learn from the land like I did. I also have concerns about the property I own outside of Ely that would be impacted by pollution from sulfide copper mining downstream from the lake our cabin is located on. My family chose to buy this land because of Farm Lake's clean water, excellent fishing, peace and quiet, and its location near the boundary waters. If sulfide mining were allowed to be conducted in the same watershed, everything we love about this area would be impacted by day-to-day mining operations, as well as the inevitable pollution.
30 seconds.
I'm also concerned that the actual property value would decline. Not only would this be detrimental to my finances, but declining property values would also harm schools and local units of government tax revenues. I urge the BLM to withdraw the 225,378 acres of national forest lands to protect the boundary waters from the threats of sulfide copper mining pollution. Thank you so much for the ability to comment.
Thank you, Alex. Next, we'll go on to Cassandra Prins. Cassandra, if you're here. Oh, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much for this opportunity to comment. My name is Cassandra Prins. I live in Schuylerville, New York. I'm a graduate of Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, and I fell in love with the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness as an adult on a 3-day paddling trip that I took 2 years ago. I'm here to voice my support for the proposed mineral withdrawal to protect the watershed of the Boundary Waters. Hard rock mining is America's most toxic industry, and a sulfide ore copper mine in the Rainy River watershed could irreparably harm the waters that flow into the heart of the Boundary Waters. Mineral withdrawal is essential to protect this priceless wilderness area, and anything less puts this ecosystem and everything that depends on it at risk, from the economies of surrounding communities to the endangered species that rely on this protected wilderness for their habitat. On my first canoe trip in the Boundary Waters, we made our way up to Lac La Croix. On day 1 of paddling, I saw wild rice for the first time, and we managed to put 4 people and 1 dog in a single canoe for a very precarious trip out onto Lake Agnes to watch the sunset. On day 2, we woke up to a perfectly still morning. You could see the clouds reflected on the smooth water. We caught and ate our first fish for dinner that night, and we lay down after dark to stargaze. The Boundary Waters is America's most visited wilderness area, and visitors like me travel to the Boundary Waters to experience its natural beauty. We go because to visit the Boundary Waters is to be reminded that wild places still exist. And the only way to guarantee that the Boundary Waters is not polluted, to ensure the waters stay clean, the air clear, the nights dark with bright stars, and the days peaceful and full of birdsong, is to ban sulfide ore copper mining in the Superior National Forest. Wallace Stegner wrote in his letter to Congress in 1960, quote, "Something will have gone out of us as a people if we ever let the last remaining wilderness be destroyed," end quote. The loss to society that would come with sulfide ore copper mining near the boundary waters would be huge, long-lasting, and devastating. There are some places that just shouldn't be mined. A sulfide ore copper mine would threaten this ecosystem, and once wild places like the boundary waters are gone, they're gone forever. I urge the Bureau of Land Management to protect the boundary waters from the threat of sulfide ore copper mining pollution. Thank you so much for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you so much for your comment. Next, we'll go to Omni Jawar. Omni, if you're here, you can star 6 to unmute yourself and star 9 to raise your hand. Okay, next we'll go to Gary Groven. Gary, feel free to raise your hand now. Okay, we will go on to our next 5 speakers. Please raise your hand to help us locate you in the virtual meeting room. And if you're joining us by phone, it's star 9 to raise your hand and star 6 to unmute. Our next 5 speakers are Lauren Dickerson, Jason Zaborski, Tim Greenleaf, Tony Wicken, and Sydney Jordan. Please go ahead and raise your hands now. And Lauren, you should be able to unmute. Hi, Lauren, are you ready? Lauren, we're currently not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you. It took a second to get something working right.
No problem.
All right. My name is Lauren Dickerson, and I'm the manager of air resources at Twin Metals, Minnesota. I'm a chemical engineer, and I've been an environmental professional working in the air quality field for 14 years. I have past experience with air permitting at agencies in California and New Mexico. And I made a switch from working in, the agency regulatory world to working for Twin Metals because I want to help solve the climate crisis. We have an amazing team of environmental professionals who all want to protect the environment and develop a world-class modern mine that can produce the minerals we need to combat climate change. The technologies needed to combat climate change require the development of new sources of minerals like copper, nickel, cobalt, and platinum group metals. The Twin Metals project alone would support the production of 280,000 electric vehicles per year. An annual copper production from the Twin Metals project would support the construction of up to 13,000 megawatts of wind turbine power or 10,000 megawatts of solar power. These metals and minerals are absolutely what this country needs to move forward on climate change. Additionally, the mineral deposits in the withdrawal area in northeastern Minnesota present an incredible opportunity to responsibly source these minerals because the US and Minnesota have some of the strongest environmental and labor regulations or protections in the world. The benefits of modern mining projects like the Twin Metals project are supported by the science. We can source the minerals needed to fight climate change and protect the environment. I also believe we have an ethical duty to pursue responsible mineral development in places like Minnesota to avoid greater environmental impacts and unethical labor practices present in other parts of the world. I strongly oppose the US Forest Service and BLM's withdrawal of lands and minerals in Northeast Minnesota from potential development because I feel that it circumvents the most appropriate way to evaluate mining projects. Assessing environmental impacts from mining relies heavily on project and site-specific information.
30 seconds.
Site-specific assessments in the existing environmental review process is the best way to determine which projects should be allowed. And if we were to follow that process, the Twin Metals project would be held up as a shining example of modern mining. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Jason Zaborski, you are up next. Please raise your hand. And we'll start our countdown timer at 30 seconds. All right, we'll now go to our next speaker, Tim Greenleaf. Tim, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for the privilege to speak today on this very important topic. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks.
Good. I wasn't sure. So yeah, my name is Tim Greenleaf. I am a senior civil engineer and a vice president at Barr Engineering Company. Barr is the largest environmental and engineering consulting firm in Minnesota. We employ more than 650 people in our Minneapolis, Duluth, and Hibbing offices. Based on our decades of work in Minnesota, my comments today focus on our confidence in the state's current environmental review and permitting processes and the evolution of the mining industry. These factors make it possible for Minnesota mines to comply with all applicable environmental quality standards and to protect our natural resources. Like I said, we have confidence in the established process for determining if a mining project can proceed in the state of Minnesota, including in the Rainy River watershed. State and federal agencies have developed a robust environmental review and regulatory system through decades of work. This longstanding system of laws, rules, and guidance provides a clear and complete authority for state and federal agencies to thoroughly review and regulate or deny approval for any mining project in Minnesota, in order to ensure that it meets the standards in place. The regulatory system also provides a framework within which specific permit requirements are to be developed to address the unique issues anticipated to exist at individual mine sites. Minnesota rules exclude mining in certain areas, such as the Boundary Waters Canoe area, and regulations for proposed non-ferrous mines located outside excluded areas require developers to site and design mines so they will not cause materially adverse effects to the environment. Further, based on technology advancements and evolving societal expectations, the practice of mining has changed. Positive community, economic, and environmental outcomes in mining are now the standard. These outcomes are supported by robust environmental review and regulatory approval processes, improved technologies, rigorous sustainability practices and guidance documents, and detailed management frameworks and reporting practices. Mine projects today focus on resource protection, community expectations, risk reduction, and continuous improvement. Mine developers are also motivated to avoid and minimize adverse effects to the environment by internal policy and planning commitments, international industry standards, regulatory and financial incentives. For these reasons, BAR does not support the application for the withdrawal of federal lands and interests within the Rainy River watershed. We
20
do,
seconds.
thank you. We do support the current process of assessment of individual projects following the established, transparent, and rigorous environmental review process currently in place. Thank you for your time today and for considering these remarks.
Thank you, Tim. Our next speaker will be Tony Wicken. Tony, you can begin your comments.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Wicken. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. For the past 35 years, I've been involved in construction in one way, form, or another. For the past 21 years, I've been a member of LIUNA, and I used to hold a Minnesota license to install underground storage tanks for gas stations and petroleum products. Excuse me. Family is the most important driver of my purpose and why I have worked so hard to provide and be a good role model for those around me. I chose this field of work because I enjoy working with my hands and being part of, excuse me, and bringing new critical infrastructure to life. I've experienced installing environmental controls on construction projects firsthand. I also know there are a lot of ways to prevent environmental impacts when the work is done correctly by skilled professionals. Imposing an arbitrary withdrawal on a huge area isn't how environmental regulations is supposed to work. It's supposed to be based on facts, not people's feelings. If you ban mining for 20 years without doing the research, all you would get is opposition of any kind of any regulation. With that being said, in closing, federal agencies should respect the will of the people and the legislatures who have already decided the the protection area they believe is necessary around the boundary waters and how mine permits should be reviewed. The legislation has rejected calls of larger mining bans and restrictions for decades, and the federal agencies should respect that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tony. Sydney Jordan, you are up next and you can begin your comments.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Thanks, Sydney.
Thank you. My name is Sydney Jordan, and I represent District 60A in the Minnesota House of Representatives. My district includes all of Northeast Minneapolis and part of Southeast Como neighborhood in Minneapolis. Today, I'm here to speak in favor of the proposed mineral withdrawal that would permanently protect the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness Watershed. I urge the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service to take this action to protect the wilderness from pollution from sulfide or copper mining. The Boundary Waters is a sacred place for my constituents and me. Please to protect the boundary waters and do everything possible to combat climate change are the #1 issue residents of my district contact me over, in addition to advancing racial justice. And it makes sense that my constituents love the boundary waters. It is America's most visited wilderness area and Minnesota's crown jewel of our public lands. We rely on public land to recreate outside, hunt, fish, and forage. The boundary waters, Birch Lake, and the surrounding area represent the cleanest and wildest land in Minnesota. I hear stories from constituents about attending camp as children, eating lake trout they caught themselves, and hearing a wolf call as they camped on a frozen lake. Sulfide or copper mining would put all of this at risk and is unacceptable. Last night, I spoke to a group of constituents about their environmental priorities, and they all brought up the importance of the boundary waters. One said to me that if Minnesota lost the boundary waters, we'd lose everything. Another said that seeing a polluted boundary waters would be like a death in his family. In addition to having deep significance to Minnesotans, the boundary waters and surrounding Superior National Forest are critical to mitigating and slowing the adverse effects of climate change. Scientific modeling by 2 major conservation organizations, the Nature Conservancy and the Wilderness Society, identifies the Quetico Superior region, which is the region of the boundary waters and the area proposed by the mineral withdrawal, as some of the most critical for combating climate change, as it is an intact boreal forest which naturally sequesters more carbon than any other terrestrial landscape. Not only would sulfide or copper mining in the area destroy this carbon sequestering biomass and habitat for vulnerable species such as wild rice, northern long-eared bats, and Canadian lynx, but mining operations would also emit a significant amount of carbon into the Earth's atmosphere. One proposed mining project in the watershed would cause greenhouse gas emissions from electricity generation of 1.723 billion pounds of carbon dioxide per year. This is equivalent to the annual emissions from the city of Duluth, Minnesota, which is Minnesota's 5th largest city. In order to achieve President Biden and Governor Walz's climate goals, I urge you to approve this mineral withdrawal. I want to thank you again for giving me this opportunity to speak today and listening to the voices of Minnesotans who overwhelmingly want to see the federal government take action to permanently protect the boundary waters. I will end by again urging the Bureau of Land Management to withdraw the 225,378 acres of national forest lands to protect the boundary waters from the threat of endless sulfide or copper mining pollution. Thanks again.
Thank you, Sydney. Before we switch to, or before we have our next speakers on, I want to thank Connie and Stephanie. The next two panelists will be joining us on screen are Dave Radford, Deputy State Director for Geospatial Services in BLM Eastern States, and Shannon Rishi, Deputy Forest Supervisor, Superior National Forest. Connie, would you like to say anything?
Before I get off, I just want to say I will continue to be listening throughout the rest of this meeting. And I really want to thank all of you for some very thoughtful and very well-prepared comments. We'll be looking into those, and I'm really anxious to hear the next group of speakers. So thank you.
Thanks. Stephanie, did you want to add anything?
I echo what Connie said. I'll continue to listen, and we really appreciate you taking the time today and through writing to comment.
Thank you. And our next 5 speakers, please raise your hand to help us locate you in the virtual meeting room. If you are joining by phone, you can select *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. The next 5 speakers are Mark Larson, Tom McCann, Doug Connell, Sean Bradford, and Tara Winder. All right, if you're joining us, Mark, go ahead and we'll start the timer. All right, our next on our speakers list is Tom. Tom, you can begin your comments.
Yeah, thank you. The Forest Service administrative operations are supported by 3 structures. One is planning, one's implementation, and the third one is monitoring. And the weakest of those 3 is monitoring. In the mid-90s, the US EPA lab, the water quality lab in Duluth, was tasked with monitoring Lake Superior. And it's a big task and a lot of questions to answer and a lot of questions to formulate. But it took 3 years for them to acquire the appropriations to even begin, and then 7 years to develop the techniques and technology to address the questions. So a 10-year period of trial and error, and finally they came up with technologies that could address the questions that were on the table. And the 20-year withdrawal is appropriate because although we've had a lot of studies, I mean, there's a lot of masters and doctorates that have been done at various levels. That's all out there and that can be discovered. What we don't know is we don't know how much sulfide and how much dissolved mineral is entering the watershed from existing exposed bedrock through rainfall and through additional disturbances such as road building. Been a lot of homes developed within the watershed, a lot of wells have been drilled. So I think the 20 years is useful for developing a monitoring program, a change detection program, and getting funding and partners together to make this monitoring system work. And then once the monitoring has been deployed, validated, calibrated, and
30
a
seconds.
third party verifiable, at that time, the mineral withdrawals could be returned. And that could be an option in the environmental document. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next on our speakers list is Doug Connell. Doug, you should be able to unmute.
Hi there. Are you able to hear me?
Yep, thanks, Doug.
Well, I'm afraid we're at the part of the meeting where you're going to start to hear some of the same things. And unlike many of the speakers, I've spent many decades visiting the boundary waters, skiing, canoeing, kayaking, both in the boundary waters, the park in Canada. And those experiences were very formative. They helped me move into a career as an environmental professional. And as one, I've worked, in fact, on some of the earliest studies, environmental studies back in the 70s. Currently, I'm a senior vice president at Bar Engineering, and I'm also on the board of Jobs for Minnesotans. And I think, the perspective I have is that you've got two very vital, very important, very precious resources, the boundary waters and its ecosystems, and the mineral deposits, which, as many of the speakers have already noted, are really important to us addressing climate change. I oppose the withdrawal, and the reasoning is this: I don't think it's a good idea to arbitrarily preempt the ability for people to design a project, to design a safe and modern approach to utilizing those minerals because of the presumption of harm. And I think as others have spoken, I think to do that, it really abdicates the responsibility that you have as agencies to do a thorough evaluation of that decision, because there's consequences either way. Society is going to demand these minerals. We need them to address climate, as others have spoken to, and they're going to need to come from somewhere. And I think an evaluation that takes that into account is the right way to go. I think that decision should, in a sense, be held to the same standard as you're asking the mines and the projects to be held. It should be based on an EIS, not a limited assessment. And it should use a science-based project that evaluates the science that's already been done and that is currently being developed. I think that's the way you answer the unanswered questions that you spoke of in your introduction, is to use the best available science. So I think you need to trust the science and our regulators in making your decision about the withdrawal. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Doug. Sean Radford, you're up next. Go ahead and unmute.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Brayford, and unlike a lot of people on here, I actually live in this area, and I have for 47 years. I've been a member of Labor's Local 1097 for 26 years, and I live in northern Minnesota, and I am the current business manager of Labor's Local 1097. My family and I spend as much time as we can hunting and fishing and camping in northern Minnesota. So we know the importance of protecting the environment. The economy in my area depends a lot on mining. Without mining, our communities, a lot of our communities, would become ghost towns. Tourism is not going to pay the bills. This is where my union members and their families, they all live here. And mining is how a majority of them make their living. A lot of my union brothers and sisters, that's basically their only income, is working in the mines. I believe the federal government should reject the ban on the 20-year withdrawal of mineral leasing and the exploration in the Superior National Forest. And I insist, and instead, the agency should follow the law and evaluate each mining proposal on its own merits. I believe we need an environmental impact statement before making such decisions that could hurt our economy and the way of life for the residents of the Iron Range. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sean. Our next commenter is Tara Winder. Tara, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can begin your comments. Tara, you should be able to unmute now.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thanks.
Bonjour, Gitegones or Gichidakwe Indigenous Cause, Mukwendo Dame. My name is Tara Widener. I am Pimina Band Ojibwe, Anishinaabe Kwe from White Earth Reservation. My relatives and ancestors have lived on this land long before Minnesota was even a state or any settlers stepped foot here. My ancestors migrated over 500 years ago. We were given a prophecy to go where the food grows on the water. That food is monoman. It's what you know as wild rice. It's the reason I exist. It kept my ancestors alive through brutal Minnesota winters and allowed us to continue to live here. It grows nowhere else in the world but around the Great Lakes, with Minnesota being one of the few remaining areas where wild rice grows. I am a ricer. I harvest wild rice. I harvest monoman, just as my ancestors have harvested monoman in a canoe with 2 wooden sticks, gently knocking the wild rice into the canoe and processing it. Monoman has a right to exist in itself. In order for that monoman to exist, it has to have clean water, free of sulfates. Sulfates strangle out the plant and doesn't allow for it to thrive. This sulfates in the water are created by sulfide mining and its runoff. I'm here to urge you to continue or to support a ban of sulfide mining to protect the water and the wild rice. And I'm also going to urge you that you cannot destroy a sacred relationship between the water and the wild rice in an attempt for a technology fix on climate change. It doesn't work that way. Do you realize that the energy, how much energy goes into mining? It takes all of the coal-fired power plants that are bringing energy into these mines. So it's not as green as folks are telling you or leading you to believe. In addition, this kind of mining has never been performed in Minnesota, the copper and nickel mining. The places where this kind of mining is existing are in dry desert areas such as Arizona and New Mexico, not in water-rich areas where the water tables are at the surface. I'm going to urge you to ban sulfite mining, protect the water, and miigwech.
Thank you, Tara. We'll go on to our next slide. Our next 5 speakers are Jerry Nelson, Steve Rule, Brooke Bartholomew, Emily Burdett, and Kevin Pranis. Please go ahead and raise your hands now. And if you're joining us by phone, you can select *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Thank you so much. We'll go on to our first commenter, Jerry Nelson. Jerry, you have 30 seconds to begin your comments. All right, next we'll go to our next commenter, Steve Rule. Steve, you should be able to begin your comments now.
Yes, hello, and thank you in advance for listening to me. Please bear with me as I walk through a personal experience that intertwines with the topic at hand. A spoiler alert, imagination will be required. First, imagine sitting in a radiology waiting room at 9:30 p.m., waiting for your daughter's MRI brain scan to be completed. Imagine being called into a consultation room awaiting a call from 3 doctors, her primary care physician, a radiologist, and gulp, a neuro-oncologist. Imagine learning that the MRI revealed a mass deep inside your daughter's brain. Imagine waiting 48 hours for the biopsy results and learning that the mass was indeed a malignant tumor, a germinoma. Imagine the relief, yes, relief of learning that although the mass could not be surgically removed, it could be eradicated through chemotherapy and proton radiation. Now imagine the unexpected delight of a 15-year-old that had just returned from a 3-day in-hospital chemotherapy treatment. She had just read about Ely Outfitting Company's essay contest in the Star Tribune. Now imagine your 15-year-old strapped on and completely immobilized on a table as if she's paralyzed, while a 3-story high machine precisely delivers proton radiation into her brain to zap the cancer cells. I wondered, what could she possibly be thinking about to calm herself? Naturally, her quiet place was a BWCA. Memories of drinking fresh water straight from the lake, catching more fish than her siblings, journaling on a rocky outcropping, singing Rick-a-Bamboo with her cousin, and gazing at the stars kept her mind and body peaceful. Truly amazing. Julia is now in college and cancer-free. As it turns out, germinoma is extremely rare. My memory is that only 38 females were diagnosed with it the year that she had it. As one can imagine, we never expected that. We never expected she would have cancer, let alone brain cancer, let alone something so rare and unusual. Now imagine that sulfide ore copper mining is permitted to occur in the Rainy River headwaters. Imagine that all of the latest technology and engineering know-how are employed to protect the environment. Imagine that all of the assurances have been made that a hazardous leak could never, ever occur. It may be easy to imagine that all of the planning sounds fail-safe and nothing could possibly go wrong. However, is it hard to imagine that something unexpected will happen that causes hazardous waste to find its way into the watershed? Unlike Julia's unexpected bout with and recovery.
Thank you, Steve. Our next commenter is Brooke Bartholomew. Brooke, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Brooke Bartholomew. I am originally from Texas, but I'm now a resident of Hopkins, Minnesota. I support the proposed mineral and geothermal leasing withdrawal in the Superior National Forest. And I have several reasons for this, including the impacts on culture and personal life, economics of the region, legal reasons, and impacts on the environment. I have visited the Boundary Waters several times, and each time I was taken away by the beauty of the wilderness area, the drinkable water, and the quiet of nature, and the dark skies full of stars. But this goes beyond a single person's experience in the area. Thousands of visitors from all over the country, plus numerous indigenous peoples, come each year to canoe, hunt, fish, gather, and spend time in nature. And that personal and cultural impact should not be overlooked. The 2 companies that have proposed mines in the area, Twin Metals Minnesota and Polymet, have dubious histories and should be further scrutinized. Both are marketing themselves as local Minnesota companies. However, Twin Metals is a subsidiary of Chilean conglomerate Antofagasta, which has faced litigation and censure for its mines polluting water supplies in Chile and diverting water from local citizens. Polymet is owned by Swiss conglomerate Glencore, which is currently under investigation for bribery of public officials in the US, UK, and Brazil, and has a history of spilling toxic waste into water supplies in Chad. This alone should be reason enough to require further rigorous independent studies on the mining and reclamation methods that these companies propose, as well as their intended funding for such methods, and take into account their track records of follow-through before proceeding. Economically, mining is historically a boom and bust industry, as can be seen in the Iron Range in Northeast Minnesota, only creating jobs for the short term. Economic studies of the revenue from recreation related to the BWCA show longer-term and sustainable job creation and revenue. As for legal reasons, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness Act of 1978 was put in place to protect wildlife, water quality, and minimize damage from mining. The Treaty of La Pointe in 1854 protects the area for fishing, hunting, and wild rice gathering. The inevitable damage from the proposed copper sulfide mines would be at odds with the protections that both of those laws provide. In terms of environmental impact, the EPA in 2010 deemed that hard rock mining, which includes copper sulfide mining, releases more toxic materials than any other industry. Subsequent reclamation efforts could never fully restore water quality to current levels and would require years of continual treatment. Twin Metals and Polymet both suggest using tailings containment methods that have been shown elsewhere to still leak out toxic materials into nearby waterways. The Boundary Waters currently contains 10% of the world's freshwater supply. And the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency states that our priority should be protection of our water sources rather than restoration, which is never 100% effective. Risks to personal health from potential mercury, lead, or asbestos leaks need to also be considered. To conclude, further studies of the impacts of these mines should take place and must be independent, free from the influence of the mining industry, and take into account personal, cultural, health risks, economic impacts, and the environmental impacts. The 20-year leasing withdrawal would allow for more time to do that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Brooke. Next, we'll go to Emily Burdett. Emily, if you're here, you have 30 seconds to begin your comments, and please raise your hand. And if you're joining by phone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Okay, we'll go on to our next speaker, Kevin Prins. Kevin, you may begin your comments now.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. My name is Kevin Prins. I'm a union organizer and a member of LIUNA Local 563. And our LIUNA represents more than 28,000 skilled construction laborers and family members across Minnesota and North Dakota. I also have the privilege of serving on Governor Tim Walz's Climate Advisory Council, and climate is a major personal and professional concern. Like many of the commenters, I grew up wilderness canoeing in the Boundary Waters in Quetico National Park, and I share the concerns expressed for the fate of the Boundary Waters and want to see it protected, not only from pollution, but also from the impacts of climate change. I think the question before the agencies today and relevant in this hearing is not who cares the most about the Boundary Waters, because I think we've certainly seen in our membership, and you're hearing from both sides today, that there's deep feeling for the Boundary Waters. I think the real question to be answered are whether a withdrawal is required to protect the Boundary Waters, whether the environmental benefits of a withdrawal outweigh the environmental harms, and whether the environmental and socioeconomic benefits in total justify withdrawal. It's not clear to me from the evidence that any of those tests is met to justify withdrawal. And more importantly, it's fairly clear that absence an environmental impact statement process, which as many environmental advocate friends have educated me and our membership, is the right way to do an assessment of decisions, public decisions that have potentially significant environmental consequences. We think that in particular, responsible development of non-ferrous mining is a critical tool for fighting climate change. And it's not just one tool among many. It's actually Minnesota's most powerful tool by orders of magnitude. Minnesota accounts for less than 2% of all US CO2 emissions, but we're home to 95% of the US nickel resource, 88% of the cobalt resource, and 75% of platinum group metals, as well as about 1/3 of the nation's copper. That means that decisions we make on mining could be far more consequential than any decision that we make regarding our transportation emissions, our electric sector emissions, our building sector emissions, or our industrial emissions. These are the metals that make possible the technologies that our members are working on installing on wind and solar facilities. It's the same metals that are needed for electric vehicles, which are supposed to replace combustion vehicles, allowing us to reduce those carbon emissions. Those metals are critical, and what Minnesota does will have a profound impact on the cost of the transition, the speed of the transition, and whether the transition is possible, as well as whether it enjoys public support. All of that needs to be strongly considered as we're evaluating what the impacts are of this decision. And I would just close into asking that an environmental impact statement process be used to evaluate this case.
Thank you, Kevin. We'll go over our next 5 speakers. Please raise your hand if, or to help us locate you in the virtual meeting room, and we'll assist you getting your microphone unmuted. If you are joining by phone, you can select *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Our next 5 speakers are Benjamin Vick, Robert Bell, Leo Keene, Amanda John Kimsey, and Jennifer Naziri. So please raise your hand now. And our first speaker will be Benjamin Vick. Benjamin, you have 30 seconds to begin speaking. We'll move on to our next speaker, Robert Bell. You will have 30 seconds to begin speaking. And if you're joining by phone, remember to *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. All right, we'll move on to our next speaker, Leo Keene. You are up next. And you'll have 30 seconds to begin speaking. All right, you should be able to unmute now.
Hi there, Leo Keene.
Hello.
I'm speaking from Whitefish, Montana, 1,200 miles away from Ely, Minnesota. But I'm very familiar with the North Woods, with the country in and around Ely. It's been very interesting for me to listen to both sides of these comments, both for and against, both expert and personal. I'm a contractor too, so I am very aware of the importance of jobs. But I would like to remind those people who are against this withdrawal and feel that the jobs are more important, that this is not a permanent withdrawal. This is a 20-year withdrawal. The copper, nickel, and other minerals will be in the ground in 20 years from now. Maybe in 20 years we will have had more time to study how this can be done well, how it can be done accurately, or if the minerals are even needed, or if there's a better place for a mine, someplace that is less susceptible to pollution, less susceptible to other environmental damage. I'm also very concerned not only about the boundary waters, which I have been visiting for almost 60 years as a canoe man. I'm also concerned about the Superior National Forest and what would become of the National Forest, and try to remind people too that this is a national forest, as is the boundary waters of federal land. So even though we don't live in or around Ely or even in Minnesota, this is important country for a lot of people a long ways away from Minnesota. I love this place. I love the boundary waters. I love northern Minnesota. I love the North Woods. I can't think of a worse place for a mine than on Birch Lake, this close to the boundary waters and in proximity to this beautiful lake, the beautiful forest of that country, and what would become of that country if a mine is developed there. I can imagine the industrialization of the Ely area, of Highway number 1, and of the landscape in this corner of the Superior National Forest. And for that reason, I am certainly in favor of a 20-year withdrawal. Let's see if we can do something different or
20
better
seconds.
20 years from now. Certainly appreciate the time, and I appreciate everyone's comments and understand both sides of the issue. I hope that we can do this withdrawal and see how things look 20 years from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leo. Our next speaker is Amanda John Kimsey. Amanda, if you're on, you'll have 30 seconds to speak, and go ahead and raise your hand. If you're joining by phone, *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. All right. Our next on our speakers list is Jennifer Nusiri. Jennifer, you'll have 30 seconds. Please raise your hand and *9 to *9 if you're joining by phone, and *6 to unmute if you're joining by phone. All right, we will go on to our next slide. For our next 5 speakers, please raise your hand to help us locate you in the virtual meeting room and assist you to get your microphone unmuted. And if you're joining us by phone, *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Our next 5 speakers are Isaac Lindstrom, Ted Davis, Malia Derrick, Rachel Schwartz, and Nathan Runke. All right, Isaac, your 30 seconds will begin now. Our next speaker is Ted Davis. Ted, if you're on, please raise your hand at this time. All right, we'll go on to our next speaker. Next on our speakers list is Malia Derrick. Malia, you may begin your comments.
Yeah, I thought I was supposed to get some notice that I was selected in the lottery. I didn't get that notice. So it's kind of a surprise to me, but anyway, I'm here from Brooklyn Park. I am in favor of the withdrawal. My main thing is this is a really big risk to take to do sulfur mining in this water basin, the Rainy River. My understanding also is the grade of the copper that they're going after is very low. It's not even the normal standard that you would get around the world. They usually have a certain level or percentage, and this is not low. This is ultra low. So to take a big risk for a beautiful, pristine area it's just not worth it. I don't see how it can be justified. And I've heard a lot of people say that we need these minerals to get into the climate agreements and standards and positions that we'd like to be for to combat climate change. This isn't going to help, not at this lower grade of copper that we're looking at. It's just not worth it. Thank you.
Thank you, Malia. We appreciate your comments. And thanks for being on, even though you didn't receive notice. So next we'll see Rachel Schwartz. Rachel, if you're on, please feel free to raise your hand. And if you're joining by phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. All right, we'll move on to our next speaker, Nathan Runke. Nathan, you're up next and should be able to unmute.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. My name is Nathan Runke. I'm the Regulatory and Political Affairs Coordinator at the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 49. We represent over 14,000 members in Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And while I've loved any experiences I've had kayaking through the boundary waters, I would oppose the U.S. Forest Service taking any action to pursue the withdrawal of lands and minerals in northeastern Minnesota from future leasing, exploration, and potential development. This action ignores the established and rigorous environmental review processes for mining projects in Minnesota. That is the only way to create a robust and complete public record for each individual project and to accurately assess it on the unique risks and benefits involved at that site. This process allows for the advancement in technology and methods to mitigate historic risks associated with mining or any other industry. It gives all interested parties a chance to shape the process with the experiences, expertise, and information they can provide. In contrast, the proposed withdrawal does not even attempt to assess the realistic risk of a project, but rather cites generalized historic risks of mining processes to exclude mining from the area. I asked the environmental analysis study all effects the proposed withdrawal would have on the people of the region. Unfortunately, I feel the proposed withdrawal would only prevent the environmentally responsible projects that would otherwise have made it through this rigorous permitting process. Preventing these projects will provide minor risk mitigation to the environment or people of the region, but the loss of these projects will cause substantial, definite, and unambiguous economic and social consequences. I ask that the environmental analysis evaluate the change to the environmental risk the proposed withdrawal would accomplish when compared with projects that would have been permitted through the exhaustive environmental standards of the current process. While the primary aim of the environmental analysis is not the economic or societal benefits mining projects will bring, they are too important not to consider. Many of our members have lived on the Iron Range their entire lives and hold mining as a vital component of their community. The proposed mining projects will harvest resources that are critical to sustain continued growth in domestic renewable energy and advanced electronic supply chains. This region contains underground reserves of strategic minerals that are just as unique as the environmental and recreational resources found on the surface. Minnesota's strong environmental and labor standards, along with its thorough permitting process, means these metals will be sourced in the safest, most environmentally conscious ways possible. This is drastically different from the poor conditions, forced labor, and massive environmental degradation found in the mining industries of some other global producers. We cannot outsource our green energy transition. And thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. We appreciate your comment, Nathan. Next, we'll go on to our next slide of speakers. Please raise your hand, help us locate you in the virtual meeting room, and assist you with getting your microphone unmuted. Our next speakers are John Thorson, Maggie Dietrichs, Bruce Jameson, Bradley Johnson, and Stefan Snyder. And if you're joining by phone, again, to unmute, and you'll use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Our first speaker is John Thorson. Go ahead, John.
Good afternoon. My name is John Thorson, and I live in Cottage Grove. I work with LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, District Council of Minnesota and North Dakota. We represent 13,000 workers who are actively engaged in a transition toward a green energy economy. I oppose the proposal before the BLM and Forest Service to withdraw 225,000 acres of lands and minerals from future exploration and projects in northern Minnesota. Our green energy future is dependent on critical minerals such as nickel, copper, cobalt found within this land that's being discussed today. As demand for clean energy technology increases over the short, medium, and ever increasing long-term, supply of critical minerals is necessary to meet ambitious national and global climate goals. Copper is critical to producing wind turbines, hybrid and electric vehicles, cell phones, electronics, and so much more. Nickel is key to the manufacture of electric cars, solar panels, batteries, and global demand for these will increase several-fold into the future. Cobalt is necessary for rechargeable batteries, including electric vehicle batteries, and we simply cannot transition to a low-carbon economy without these critical minerals. I believe Minnesota can be the safest, most regulated domestic source for raw materials, such as these for renewable energy, in part because that's where the minerals are. The Duluth complex holds one of the largest untapped deposits of these metals in the world. 95% of our nation's nickel, 88% of our nation's cobalt, and over 1/3 of our nation's copper. A withdrawal decision would take 2/3 of these critical mineral deposits off the table for a generation or more. I trust the science and rigorous process that state and federal agencies have in place today. I have faith in the robust environmental review and regulatory regime that exists. This long-standing system of laws, rules, guidance provide clear and complete authority for state and federal agencies to thoroughly review and regulate or deny approval for any mining project in Minnesota to ensure it meets these standards. We need these minerals. We need clean water and a safe environment. I think the challenge before us is to ensure that this is done safely. And for these reasons, I oppose the withdrawal decision and urge the use of an EIS to evaluate the safety of individual mining projects within this area. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up is Maggie Dietrichs. Maggie, if you're on, please raise your hand. You can use *9 to raise your hand if you're joining by phone and *6 to unmute. You have 30 seconds to begin your comments. Our next commenter is Bruce Jameson. Bruce, you'll have 30 seconds to begin your comments. And again, if you're joining by phone, you can select *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. All right, we will go to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Bradley Johnson. Bradley, if you're here, please feel free to raise your hand. And if you're joining by phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Thanks. We'll go to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Stephen Snyder. Stephen, you may begin your comments.
My name is Steve Snyder. My roots run very deep in northeastern Minnesota. My grandparents came to Ely in the early 1900s. My grandfather was an underground miner at what was then called the Oliver Mine, later called the Pioneer Mine in Ely. I had an opportunity to put myself through college working for 4 summers as a canoe and fishing guide in the Boundary Waters canoe area called the Canoe Country back in those days. Best job you could ever have. My guests caught fish every time I took them out over those 4 summers, a personal record of which I'm quite proud. I have now canoed in the Boundary Waters and the adjacent Quetico for more than 60 years, and I now canoe with my grandson. In 1991 and 92, my wife and I had a log home built on an island on an access lake to the Boundary Waters. Now we spend May through September there, and on occasion in the winter, we snowshoe out to that island as well. I strongly support the withdrawal of mining leases on the adjacent to the Boundary Waters and the Boundary Waters watershed. This lake country is simply the wrong place for a toxic mine. Because of the limited time, I'd like to address just one important economic consideration that I don't think has been mentioned yet. Our initial log home and 2 more recent additions to it were built by local contractors entirely with their local trades and workers. We buy all of our supplies, groceries, gas, hardware, outdoor equipment, fishing equipment, visit restaurants, participate at church, etc. In Ely. In total, we've probably poured well over $1 million into the Ely economy as seasonal residents there, probably closer to $2 million over the years. We have done this because of the adjacent Boundary Waters canoe area wilderness and its pristine wilderness, and because we want to support the local community. But I suspect we're just, and I know that we are just 2 of many seasonal residents like that who support the local community. But it is true, we would never have built and stayed near Ely, nor would I expect with these other residents, permanent and seasonal, if there had been a mine in the sulfide bearing ores with its inevitable toxic runoffs in that area. No one selects a vacation or retirement home in a polluted environment. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next, we'll go on to our next slide. Our next speakers, please raise your hands if you're here today. And if you're joining us by phone, you can raise your hand using *9 and unmute using *6. Our next speakers are Deborah Huskins, Jonathan Caston, Diane Murenher, Zach Miller, and Robin Cascade. First up is Deborah Huskins. Deborah, you can unmute and begin your comments.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much for the ability to comment today. I started visiting the Boundary Waters canoe area when I was 4 and a half in the early 1950s. My father and his father before him treasured this area, and they loved their opportunities to canoe, camp, and fish. They imparted their enthusiasm to us kids and us to our kids. I'm very familiar with the specific area on the South Kawishwe River and Birch Lake where Twin Metals wants to open a copper nickel mine. I've paddled that area often. I strongly support the proposed mineral withdrawal of the boundary waters, the Rainy River watershed, and the surrounding federal lands from mineral activities for up to 20 years. This incredible place deserves it. No risks should be undertaken without a comprehensive review and an analysis of all the aspects. Don't allow mining to proceed in this area without a full and complete understanding of all potential threats, a realistic understanding of the ecology's ability to mitigate damage, and an objective evaluation of the mining company's promises and their ability to deliver on their promises. The scope of review should include, and this is not all that it should include, but definitely should include not only Twin Metals as it is currently proposed, but also other mining interests, both from Twin Metals and other companies in the area. The foreseeable impact on one of the world's best freshwater resources. We need this fresh water. Foreseeable effects of the vehicle exhaust gas emissions, particulate, and other airborne substances that will not stay within map-drawn boundaries. The economic impacts and alternatives to sulfide mining that can improve the economy and not be subject to the boom and bust cycle of mining. We can improve jobs and not have them be dependent on mining. Alternative ways to obtain copper, nickel, and other minerals, including recovery and recycling, and also other potential innovations that will not require these minerals. Reasonable expectations of thorough enforcement of restrictions over decades and centuries. Monitoring and enforcement is going to be critical for a very long time, and will that actually happen? And climate change impacts. Other speakers have spoken about the climate change impacts and there are the many ways in which they will occur. I urge you to look at this great place. If you haven't been there, look at a map. If you can, fly over it and see all the lakes and streams that interconnect. Sulfide mining is inconsistent with and in conflict with preserving and protecting this wilderness. You are charged to do that. Don't trust the mining company's assertions and don't risk this national treasure. Please issue the withdrawal. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. We'll move on to our next speaker, Jonathan Caston. Jonathan, if you're on, you have 30 seconds to speak. And if you're joining by phone, you can select *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Our next speaker is Diane McInerney. Diane, if you're on, you can now, you should be able to unmute yourself and begin your comments. Hi, Diane. We see you're on. You have 30 seconds to begin your comments. Go ahead and select unmute. It should be on the bottom left corner of your screen. Diane, it seems like you unmuted for a second. If you want to go into your audio options, you can select just to make sure you have your microphone enabled, but go ahead and try to select unmute again. If you're joining by phone, go ahead and hit *9 to unmute. Or *6 to unmute, my apologies, *6. All right, Diane, we'll come back to you at the end of the slide. Zach Miller is our next commenter. Zach, go ahead and begin your comments now. Hi, Zach. I am not hearing you. If you would like to begin your comments, go ahead and check your microphone, your audio, just to make
How
sure
about
you're.
now? Yes, shake your head, yes. Okay, great.
Yes,
Hi, everyone. My name's Zach. Thank you for listening to me. And I'm glad to get the chance to go on public record with this statement here. I'm number 49, and I've listened to all 48 that have come before me. And I do thank you, everyone on this call, for listening to everyone. And the points are well taken, and I'm trying to listen to both sides. I recently listened to a professor say that if you're not going to come to a debate with your mind open on what would change your mind to the other side, don't come. And so I'm here with that framework in mind. But what's becoming obvious to me is that this national piece of land that's been set aside for the people, for we the people, is being debated by two different types of people. And I think we're having a tough time with that. And what I mean by that is nobody has called me to ask me for my personal experiences at the Boundary Waters. I have many of them and would love to give them to somebody, but that to me seems selfish. And so rather than use my time to talk about what this place means to me, I think it's important to look at everyone's motivations here and really ask ourselves, what are we trying to achieve by sitting down and having this conversation? And to me, the thing that's sticking out is the people that are trying to, the arguments that are coming to be made for keeping these mineral leases in place are coming from people who seem to have had this meeting put on their Outlook calendars by someone who's paid for them to do so. Whereas I'm here on my own accord, sneaking around outside of work to be on this phone call, and I don't have another voice. I'm looking at all of you in this meeting, the Daves, the Shannons, the Rachels, the Connies. You are our voice because we don't have the legal means to say anything loudly enough other than through these 3-minute comments. And I don't know how many of these I can do. I'll keep doing them, but we need you. You are our voice. You are our entity in the United States to be able to say, we the people, we the average Joe who has no qualifications to back up their preferences other than I like to canoe here and feel it's an asset to our country. We need a voice, and you are here to provide us that voice in a legal and in a professional and in a institutional sense. Thank you for listening. Thanks everyone for listening and participating. Let's have a great season this year, huh? Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Our next speaker is Robin. Robin, you should be able to unmute now and begin your comments. Robin, you've been given the microphone. Go ahead and select unmute on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Robin Cascade, and I am a volunteer leader for the Northern San Juan chapter of the National Organization Great Old Broads for Wilderness. I reside in the Uncompahgre Valley, the traditional homelands of the Ute people in Southwest Colorado. We urge the BLM to accept the U.S. Forest Service application for mineral withdrawal in the Rainy River drainage for the maximum allowed period of 20 years. Furthermore, we ask the BLM to terminate the 2 unlawfully reinstated and renewed Twin Metals leases and not approve or renew any other leases. We urge you to take all measures within your authority to protect the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness from sulfide or copper mining. Here in the Uncompahgre Valley, and where I lived previously in Leadville, Colorado, the creeks and rivers run in shades of mustard yellow to brick orange due to pollution from mining. These creeks are lifeless. Leadville is a Superfund site. Agencies, local governments, taxpayers, and nonprofits continue the decades of cleanup and mitigation. Just over the pass near Silverton, the Animas River made national news in 2015 when contaminants when a containment wall at Gold King Mine failed, flooding the river with contaminants. West of my home, a plethora of abandoned uranium mines continue to contaminate soils and water. while corporations who profited from these operations are long gone and absolved of responsibility for cleanup. I am no stranger to the impacts of mining on ecosystems, communities, and human health. Minnesota is gifted with a national and natural treasure. In 2015, I enjoyed 2 weeks paddling and exploring the Boundary Waters. The beauty, tranquility, wildlife, and intact ecosystems of this aquatic wonder are unmatched in our country and deserving of the greatest protection from encroachment. Mining on adjacent federal lands would negatively impact this pristine environment, as well as the economic value afforded by the Boundary Waters. Contaminants from mining will undoubtedly flow into the wilderness area under normal operating conditions. Even with no accidents, waste from sulfide or copper mining in contact with water creates sulfuric acid, in which no species can survive. The devastation of such acid trickling into surface waters and reaching the Boundary Waters is unacceptable. Noise and light pollution will also negatively impact the region, as will increased dust and vehicular traffic. The economic benefits of mining in the region are short-lived and will damage natural resources, while current thriving economies based upon recreation, wildlife watching, and the intrinsic values of healthy ecosystems will endure long into the future. My visit to the Boundary Waters in Ely found me supporting outfitters and campgrounds, visiting museums, buying groceries, and eating at restaurants. My dollars stayed in the community, supporting a robust local economy. Extractive mining operations destroy the landscape and exploit local.
Thank you. Next, we'll circle back to Diane. So Diane, we still see that you're in the meeting. We've given you the virtual mic. If you would like to unmute yourself and begin your comments, we'll give you 30 seconds. And if you've joined by phone, go ahead and select *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. All right, we will go to our next slide. Before we do that, I'd just like to remind everyone that the BLM and the Forest Service, or these comments, are considered equally. So whether you submit them verbally today or in writing. So we'll share the in the chat the information to submit comments in writing again too, but we just wanted to share that reminder. And also we're going to have a switch of panelists. So Dave and Shannon, thank you so much for joining me on screen. Is there anything either of you would like to say?
I'd like to say we appreciate your comments and we will continue to listen even though we aren't on screen. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Anything from you, Shannon?
No, I'll just echo what others have said. I just appreciate everyone taking the time today to join us and share your comments with us, and we'll continue to listen and look forward to the next section. So thanks.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll go on to our next 5 speakers. And thanks for already raising your hands, folks. The names of our next 5 speakers are Ben Weidman, Ingrid Lyons, Angela Campbell, Craig Enstrom, and Jim Solred. All right, Ben, you're up first. You have the virtual mic and you can begin your comments.
Rachel, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Perfect, thank you. My name is Ben Weideman. I've been a skilled construction laborer for the past 18 years. I'm also a member of Local 563. Thanks for allowing me to comment today. I do appreciate that. A few things that define me as a person, those things would be my family, the outdoors, along with my work. All of these things are very, very much intertwined. My family loves the outdoors, outdoor activities that the Boundary Waters Wilderness offers, whether that be hiking, camping, canoeing, fishing. We've used BLM lands and US Forest Service lands, not only in Minnesota, but throughout the entire US. My family also enjoys my good union middle-class job that I have. And just like everyone here on all these calls and all the comments that we've heard, you know, my family and everybody here, we want to enjoy that boundary waters, not only now, but forever. And I think that can be done safely, and we still can have a positive impact on our economy. For that reason, I believe that the federal government should reject a ban for a 20-year withdrawal of mineral leasing and exploration. We already have existing federal and state environmental regulations, and we need to let the process work and play out. There have been many generations of mining in northern Minnesota. We can produce minerals that we need for wind, solar, and electric vehicles right here locally. I believe that we can do it without harming the environment and keeping good jobs right here in Minnesota. In closing, let's follow the processes already set in place. I believe that we need a formal environmental impact statement before decisions are made that can hurt our economy and our local efforts to fight climate change. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ben. And thanks to Stephanie, Carmen, and Connie Cummins for joining me on screen. We'll go to our next speaker, which is Ingrid Lyons. So Ingrid, your microphone is unmuted and you may begin your comments.
Thank you so much. My name is Ingrid Lyons. I've been going to the Boundary Waters with my family for 24 of my 28 years and have a cabin just outside of Ely. This lakeland wilderness has had an incredible effect on my personal and professional life. I care about a number of specific topics when considering a 20-year mineral withdrawal in this area. First is the protection of this wilderness, which would have significant implications for climate mitigation. We are knee-deep in a global climate crisis, and protecting the Boundary Waters watershed is important to climate resilience in the face of this crisis. With regards to renewable energies, there are places where domestic sourcing of these minerals is simply not appropriate. This is not to mention our allies with vastly wealthier mineral deposits and the options for recycling these metals. Suffice it to say, the Twin Metals mine and mining in this watershed is not critical for a clean energy future. Second, the Boundary Waters area is of major cultural significance. This area is 1854 Treaty Authority land, and the Twin Metals project and subsequent damage to the water and the land would significantly impact Minnesota's tribes' ability to hunt, fish, and gather in this area, especially when it comes to wild rice. This would constitute a monumental disregard of Native sovereignty and rights. There's also an inherent value to this wilderness. It is not surprising how many people love this wilderness and all it provides. What is not in question here is how much we all enjoy and value this place. But what is in question is if we can trust that this company, which is owned by a foreign mining conglomerate with a terrible environmental and human rights record, will somehow do something that has never been accomplished before: operate a copper mine that does not pollute. The Boundary Waters should not be made to be a guinea pig for this industry. Thank you all so much for your time and for listening to the public and to the science and for following the process, which, to be clear, is what you are doing. I urge you to continue your good work and move forward with the 20-year withdrawal of the proposed acreage in the watershed of the Boundary Waters. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ingrid. Angela Campbell, you're up next and we'll give you the virtual mic. Go ahead and unmute yourself and begin your comments.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you very much. My name is Angela Campbell. I'm here to express my strong opposition to the withdrawal of 225,000 acres of Forest Service lands in the Rainy River watershed and the imposition of a moratorium on mining activity for 20 years. I serve on the Ely City Council and chair the Ely Housing and Redevelopment Authority. During the 30 years I've lived in Ely, I have seen Ely's economy and population drastically decline. This, despite the fact that the BWCW has been the benefactor of a great deal of federal and state legislation to ensure that tourism industry suffers no harm from mining operations. Consider these facts. Mining was banned in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness by the Wilderness Act of 1964. The 1978 BWCAW Act created an additional mining ban in the 220,000 acre mining protection area to create a buffer around the BWCAW area. In 1976, Minnesota adopted a statute prohibiting all mining within the BWCAW while expressly allowing ongoing mineral exploration and development outside of the protected areas. The Superior National Forest Plan identifies mining as a permitted activity in the Twin Meadows proposed mining project. Since 1967, Minnesota state leases for non-ferrous minerals have required that leases meet all state and federal regulations on federal and state surface land, received approval from Minnesota for surface use, notifying surface owners, and retain responsibility for damages. In 1973, Minnesota passed the Environmental Policy Act that required the review of proposed mining projects. In 1980, Minnesota enacted a law to regulate drillers of exploratory borings. In 1981, Minnesota adopted rules regulating iron mining and non-ferrous mining. The non-ferrous mining rules extended the mining ban beyond the BWCAW to include a corridor 1/4 mile wide around the BWCAW. In 1973, Minnesota passed the law requiring mining companies to provide financial assurance regarding their mining operations for non-ferrous minings. Please understand, with legislation and regulatory enactions, that the federal government and Minnesota in past years, all of the steps necessary to protect the BWCAW has been taken. Thank you.
Good job. Very good.
Thank you, Angela. We'll go on to our next commenter, Craig Enstrom. You have the virtual mic and you can unmute yourself now and begin your comments.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Craig Enstrom. I live in Lakeville, Minnesota, and I'm opposed to the federal mining withdrawal. I've been a skilled union construction laborer for 20 years. Throughout those years, I've done a lot of hard work to provide for my family. Some of that is work is involved installing environmental controls around construction projects. So I know there are a lot of ways to prevent environmental impacts when the work is done by a skilled workforce. Myself and many of my union brothers and sisters spend a lot of time off hunting and fishing in northern Minnesota. I take my wife and daughters fishing just about every weekend in the summer, and I take my English setter rough grouse hunting every fall in the BWCA. They are the reason for me that we need to get this right. Further restrictions on copper nickel mining will hurt the Superior National Forest and the BWCA because climate change is a bigger threat than mining. The ban here makes it so we have to import our resources from countries with little environmental standards. It also means good family sustainable jobs are lost, and that is not acceptable. We have generations of mining experience in our region and need to keep it that way. The agencies need to explain why the proposed mineral withdrawal is needed when existing laws are more than adequate. Imposing an arbitrary withdrawal on a huge area isn't how environmental regulation is supposed to work. It's supposed to be based on facts, not people's feelings. If you ban mining for 20 years without doing research, all you will get is opposition of any kind of regulation. The federal government should reject a ban for a 20-year withdrawal of mineral leasing and exploration in the Superior National Forest. Instead, the agencies should follow the law and evaluate each mining proposal on its own merits. The concerns raised by supporters of the withdrawal are already addressed by existing federal and state environmental regulations. We need to let the process work. Finally, I urge you to not just follow the science, but also to follow the correct process for public decisions that have major environmental consequences. We need a formal environmental impact statement before making a decision that could hurt our economy and our efforts to fight climate change. An EIS is what the law requires, and it's the right thing to do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Craig. Next up on our speakers list is Jim Surud. Jim, we'll give you the virtual mic and you'll be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think that's it.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Thanks to Zach Miller for his appropriate charge to you staff people to take your job appropriately and seriously. I'm in favor of the 20-year moratorium. If there were 1,000 copies of the BWCA around the world, there might be a case to be made for one try at mining. And after 50 years, could prove or disprove contamination or benefits. But with only one such place on Earth, no way. Human beings have been on this earth for a minuscule blip of history since life on Earth began. It has only taken us the past 200 years to lay waste to most of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. All right, we will go to our next 5 speakers. Please raise your hand if you're here with us, and I'll read those 5 names aloud. And if you are joining by phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Thank you. Our next 5 speakers are Kyle Sebeski, Linda Walling, Louis Galdieri, Amanda Hefner, and Cosgrove. And we'll begin with Kyle Sebeski. Kyle, you'll have 30 seconds to begin your comments. And just a reminder, it's *9 to raise your hand on your phone and *6 to unmute. Okay, we'll go on to our next speaker, Linda. We've given you the virtual mic. Go ahead and begin your comments.
This is Linda Walling, and you're hearing me, I hope?
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks, Linda.
I currently live in Woodbury, Minnesota, and I strongly support the proposed 20-year mineral withdrawal to protect the watershed, which extends wider than 1/4 mile outside of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. Like many others, I first experienced the Boundary Waters over 50 years ago. We drove with some friends from Cincinnati, Ohio to canoe camp in this amazing wilderness. And as others did, we were astonished at the pristine days, beautiful, dark, star-filled nights, clean water, fish that you could eat without worrying about toxins, and a profound quiet. Now my grandson has had a similar experience with a Y camp in northern Minnesota, and he's planning a canoe trip with his family in the Boundary Waters. It's an opportunity for him to acquire some important life skills: planning, execution, map reading, weather awareness, self-sufficiency, and respect for the environment and the animals that live in it. I am deeply concerned that sulfide ore mining in the Rainy River watershed, which is bigger than the Boundary Waters, will permanently pollute this area and destroy this unique wilderness for all involved. According to the EPA, hard rock mining is America's most toxic industry and contributes to more Superfund sites, like the ones in Arizona, than any other activity. Even without a spill, the contamination produced by this will flow into the watershed. Any mistake will have catastrophic events and will not be cleanable, given the remoteness of this area. Destruction of the Boundary Waters would end all future trips for everyone and the incredible experiences and skills acquired with those trips. It would also destroy the $900 million tourism economy with 17,000 jobs in northern Minnesota that has grown because of folks like myself and my grandson. That's a sustainable economy. Boom and bust mining is not. I'm also many speakers have extolled the rigorous process that Minnesota has for handling environmentally sensitive projects, but our recent experience with the Line 3 pipeline with Enbridge causes me to question just how well those processes work. I really support the withdrawal of this 20-year mineral lease for the entire watershed of this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Up next is Louis. Louis, we'll give you the virtual mic and go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for taking my comment and everybody else's comments. I think it's really important that we all get together and listen. I'm a researcher and a documentary filmmaker based in New York City. I just have a few comments. Federal lands in the Rainy River watershed should be withdrawn from disposition under US mineral and geothermal leasing laws for the proposed initial 20-year period, if not permanently. This is an overdue decision grounded in science, economics, law, and environmental ethics. As I said, it's overdue, but why hasn't it already happened? A lot of people here have talked about following the process, so let's talk about the process. How did this withdrawal process, which started in 2017, go off track? I detail in my written comments, and I won't get into it here, but agency records obtained through the Freedom of Information Act show clearly that a foreign mining company acted to prevent the withdrawal starting in 2017. And from 2017 to 2021, members of Congress and the executive branch ran political interference on its behalf. Decisions taken behind closed doors during that period served foreign private interests, not the American public interest. And the agencies now have an opportunity to rectify the situation. What I want to emphasize here is that this is not only about protecting the boundary waters, this is about good government. The announcement on October 20th that the Biden administration will complete the science-based environmental analysis was encouraging, but given all the political interference over the past 4 or 5 years, the 2-year study really should have been started all over again from scratch in the interest of scientific integrity. At the very least, Secretary Vilsack should release unredacted the preliminary findings of the canceled 2-year study so they can be compared with the new results. And as agencies work toward a science-based decision on the 20-year withdrawal, they also need to take additional steps to restore public confidence and guard against undue influence. As a first step, the USDA Inspector General could review Sonny Perdue's decision to cancel the 2017 withdrawal and report on scientific independence, ethical conduct, and political interference at the agency. Finally, the agencies can help raise standards, mainly by convening on the question, what does it mean to mine responsibly? Rigorous and practical guidance is needed on this point. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Up next, we have Amanda Hefner. Amanda, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can begin your comments.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent. My name is Amanda Hefner and I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. I very strongly support the proposed mineral withdrawal to protect the watershed of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. This specific type of mining is unjustifiable in this area. The threats posed by sulfide or copper mining are incredibly dangerous and would cause irreversible damage to what is known as Minnesota's crown jewel. Sulfide or copper mining is a particularly toxic type of mining that has never been done before in Minnesota, and if allowed to take place in the watershed of the Boundary Waters, it would permanently damage one of the country's most unique, sensitive, and important areas. It is not just speculation that a sulfide or copper mine would pollute. It is all but guaranteed. There's never been one of these mines established that hasn't damaged the surrounding ecosystem. That is the science. Technology is not fail-safe and accidents happen. I want the boundary waters to be protected because quite simply, there's no place like it in the world. I care very deeply about preserving the clean water that currently exists in the wilderness. The Boundary Waters has some of the cleanest water anywhere. There's not a lot of places you can go and dip your cup in the water, literally drink out of the lake. Mining would change that forever. Along with the Superior National Forest, the Boundary Waters contains 20% of all of the fresh water in the entire National Forest system. A sulfide or copper mine would be devastating to the clean water of the Boundary Waters. I also love to fish, whether it be bass, walleye, northern pike, or trout. The interconnected lakes and streams of the Boundary Waters offers a special ecosystem full of aquatic biodiversity. Fish and aquatic habitats will be negatively affected by nearby mineral mines. Acid mine drainage increases the acidity of water, and as acidity increases, we know certain species of fish will be unable to survive. There's also a real concern of high mercury levels in the water from mining pollution. If there are higher mercury levels in fish, not only will humans not be able to eat them, but loons, the state bird of Minnesota, will also lose their main food source along with other animals that rely on fish to survive as well. I am not a native Minnesotan, but I call this place home. I have a lot of pride in the Boundary Waters and northern Minnesota. I did not grow up here, but if I have kids, I want them to be able to enjoy this incredible wilderness just like I have. The Boundary Waters offers a world-class wilderness experience. A world-class wilderness experience, and a sulfide or copper mine would not only ruin recreation, but one of our state's most precious resources. Because of this, I urge the BLM to withdraw the 225,378 acres of national forest lands to protect the Boundary Waters from the threat of endless sulfide or copper mining pollution. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for your comments, Amanda. Next up, we have Anne. So Anne, you've been given the virtual mic and you can begin your comments.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Anne Cosgrove. I live in both Minneapolis and Ely, Minnesota. I'm here to lend my support for the proposed 20-year mineral withdrawal. I've been paddling in the Boundary Waters for over 50 years. Our 3 daughters grew up taking canoe trips with my husband and myself. All 3 have gone on to lead their own trips through the YMCA camps of northern Minnesota. My husband and I have 2 small grandchildren, and we are looking forward to experiencing it all again through their eyes. We've had a cabin in Ely for 26 years. It is a place of respite and family time, appreciating nature and our unique, beautiful wilderness. Science and past sulfide mine disasters have proven sulfide copper mining in the watershed of the Boundary Waters would cause irreparable harm to the water, wildlife, the wilderness, as well as the community of Ely. Most, if not all, businesses in town rely in some way on the seasonal residents as well as tourists. We will be gone if the mining goes through. Hunting and fishing will be gone, and in a few short years, so will the mining company and their jobs. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Anne. We'll go to our next 5 speakers. Before that, I want to thank Connie for joining Stephanie and I on screen, and we'll now be joined by Sri Hamilton from the Forest Service. Sri, welcome, and thanks to all our speakers. For the next 5 speakers, please raise your hands. If you see your name on screen, you can use the *9 button if you're joining by phone to raise your hand, and *6 to unmute. Our next 5 speakers are Joshua Marcaros, Octavio Chung Bustamante, Tina Pint, Dan Hall, and John Graham. Thank you all so much for joining today. And Joshua, you have the virtual mic and you can unmute.
Thank you. My name is Jay Kyle Macarios, and I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm a member of Carpenters Local 322. I think there are 2 things that we all should agree on with respect to copper nickel mining in northern Minnesota. The first is that we must protect the Boundary Waters and our other waterways. And the second is that the minerals underground in Minnesota are critical to our ability to fight climate change. 95% of the nation's domestic nickel source is in northern Minnesota, and 88% of the nation's cobalt is underground in Minnesota. Cobalt has been, and nickel was just proposed to be added to the critical minerals list by the US Geological Survey. Rechargeable batteries cannot be made without them. President Joe Biden's White House report on building resilient supply chains states, and I quote, "As demand for clean energy technology increases over the short and medium term, an increased supply of critical minerals and materials will be necessary to meet national and global climate goals." End quote. This report also lists copper as a critical metal. Minnesota holds 1/3 of US known copper resources. If we accept this premise, then we must reject the argument that mining copper, nickel, cobalt, and other metals cannot be done safely. The challenge facing us demands that we figure out how to mine them while protecting our national treasures. The only way to do this is to embrace science and innovation. The US and the world are facing a serious short-term supply chain problem with regard to these minerals. The World Bank says that in order to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius or less, we need to mine as much copper in the next 25 years as we've mined in the past 5,000. We cannot build the electric cars, rechargeable batteries, electric vehicle charging stations, wind turbines, solar panels, or continue to move from fossil fuels to renewable energy without a dramatic increase in the mining and production of these minerals. If this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that we need to trust science and scientists. I'm not a doctor or a biologist, and I was nervous about possible side effects of getting a COVID vaccine, but I got it because I trust Dr. Fauci and I trust the CDC to tell me what's best. I'm also not a hydrogeologist, so I have no idea if these metals can be mined without threatening runoff. But I know we need to figure that out. We should trust government experts and scientists to rigorously evaluate actual specific plans that are proposed, such as the mine plan of operation that's been proposed by Twin Metals. We trusted Fauci and the CDC to tell us that vaccines are safe and effective. Now we need science, not fear, not hyperbole, to help us solve this challenge as well. This withdrawal would be a big step in the wrong direction. I also think that the environmental assessment being conducted to consider this withdrawal is inadequate, superficial, and rushed. Like other significant proposals, this withdrawal proposal should be required to undergo a full environmental impact statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Octavio. Octavio, we've given you the virtual mic and you can go ahead and unmute yourself now.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, my name is Octavio Bustamante. I'm a member of LAUNA, Labor's International Union of North America. I have been a LAUNA member for 14 years. I have a wife and 2 kids, and we enjoy spending as much time as we can outdoors. One of our favorite activities is camping, and we believe in preserving clean water and protecting our environment because it is our responsibility to have it there for our kids, our friends, and our neighbors. I also believe in science, but the withdrawal proposal will prevent investment in our communities. This could hurt hundreds of workers. We can produce these minerals right here at home. If we don't produce these minerals here, we will end up getting this mineral from somewhere else. A mining project in Minnesota will have some of the highest environmental standards in the world. If we stop mining here, we are going to have to rely on mining minerals from countries with lower standards. The federal government should work with Minnesota and other states to figure out how we can produce these minerals in the same manners. These minerals that we actually need for renewable energy like wind and solar, and for these new electric cars. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Octavio. Tina, you are up next. We'll give you the virtual mic and you can unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. My name is Tina Pint, and I am a hydrogeologist by training and a licensed professional geologist with the state of Minnesota. I consider myself an environmentalist, and like many people who have spoken today, I too love the boundary waters and have fond memories of trips to the wilderness, and I too want to see it protected. As an environmentalist, it may be easy to say that mining in the Rainy River watershed should be banned. However, I also have the benefit of spending my 20-year career working in the environmental field and with Minnesota mining companies and regulators on environmental review and permitting projects. This experience gives me the confidence in modern mining using 21st century technology when coupled with our robust regulatory processes allows for safe, environmentally responsible mining. I've seen it done and I know that it's possible. As an environmental professional, when I think about risks to the BWCA, it isn't copper nickel mining that I fear. I know that risks from mining can be managed. What I fear are the effects that climate change will have on the boundary waters if the US doesn't get serious about transitioning to a green economy. To do that, we need to mine the critical minerals found within the Duluth complex. I echo the comments from others before me that as you consider the withdrawal of these critical minerals from future development, please also consider the environmental effects not mining these minerals will have on the boundary waters, of how not having a domestic supply of critical minerals will affect our ability to develop the solar resources, the wind resources, and the electric vehicles we need to combat climate change. I fear that given what we are already seeing with climate change, that 20 years is too long to wait. As others have said, I believe mining companies should be allowed to propose responsible mining methods for extracting these critical minerals, and that the merits of those projects should be assessed on an individual project by project basis. For these reasons, I do not support the application for the withdrawal of federal lands and interests within the Rainy River watershed. I do support the current process of assessment of individual projects following the established, transparent, and rigorous environmental review processes currently in place after a company submits a formal project proposal. Thank you for your time today and for considering these comments.
Thank you, Tina. Up next is Dan Hall. Dan, if you've joined us today, please raise your hand and we'll give you the virtual microphone. If you've joined by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. You'll have 30 seconds. All right, we'll go to our next commenter, John Graham. You're next on our speakers list. So please raise your hand and we'll give you the virtual microphone. If you've joined by phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. You'll have 30 seconds. All right, we'll go to our next slide. Please raise your hand. I see folks already doing that, which is great. Raise your hand, help us locate you and assist you to get your microphone unmuted. Our next 5 speakers are Spencer Shaver, Carol Overland, Mark Bauman, Joy Anderson, and Roger Remark. If you have joined by phone, go ahead and use the *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute when it's your turn. Spencer, you can be in your comments now. Hi, Spencer. We're not hearing you yet. Go ahead and use the audio settings button just to make sure you have the right microphone selected or there aren't any, headphones or something else on there.
Yes.
We can hear you now. Thanks, Spencer.
Got it.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah,
No
thank
problem.
you for the opportunity to submit comments. And I'm speaking in support of the proposed withdrawal for a 20-year term by your agencies, then permanent protection through legislation passed through Congress. And I know this to be the only process that would guarantee permanent protection for the Boundary Waters watershed from proposed sulfide or copper mining, something I would encourage all of us to do if we hope to pass down the clean water, fishing, hunting, and the same access to public land that you and I have to future generations. And my name is Spencer Shaver. I'm an avid Boundary Waters user and the conservation director at Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters. I was a student at the University of Minnesota's Environmental Science Policy and Management program, where I studied conservation resource management. The first fish I caught in the Boundary Waters was on a minnow on Loch LaCroix when I was 7. And my dad, brother, and I took a float plane across the border to the Canadian side of the Boundary Waters, fished for a few days out of a lodge, and I'd never seen so many walleye. While I was reeling in one near the end of our trip, I watched the rod throw back with a big pike that had caught onto a walleye that I had also caught. And I'd fish other places, but I'd never caught 2 fish at once. And since that point, I've gone back to the BWCA every year. And my grandpa was actually a float plane pilot there, mostly taking fishing groups to and from camp. And all this area that I'm talking about is downstream of the proposed withdrawal area and would be affected by the proposed withdrawal. So I actually went on to become a guide in the Boundary Waters, guided my first trip there in 2014. Since then, I've had the pleasure of safely leading dozens of trips and hundreds of kids, campers, and college students throughout the Boundary Waters. I've worked for the YMCA, the University of Minnesota, and multiple nonprofits taking kids through the wilderness. They typically have a great time, but hate the mosquitoes. And when my older brother was one of these kids, when he was 13, he went on a Boundary Waters trip there for the first time. And he talks about a story where another kid on his trip felt homesick after a particularly tough day. And so my brother stayed up one night to tell the fellow camper the story of the little engine that could. And fast forward only 7 years, my brother was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps infantry deployed in the Sangin River Valley in southern Afghanistan. And at 20, he was a squad leader of 16 fellow Americans, all of whom returned from his deployment safely after 80 combat patrols with Allied and Afghan security forces. He connects his childhood experiences in the Boundary Waters directly to his decision to enlist in the Marine Corps and has been to the Boundary Waters many times, public land that he fought to protect after his service. I know going to the Boundary Waters was a foundational experience for me and a million other kids like me, and experiences and education that kids need happen there every day, every summer, every trip. Thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Up next is Carol. Carol, we'll give you the virtual mic and you can begin your comments.
Testing 1, 2.
We can hear you.
Hello, I'm Carol Overland. I'm an attorney with utility regulatory and public advocacy practice based in Red Wing, Minnesota, and I'm here as an individual and not representing any party in this matter. Procedurally, I want to register strong objections to this process. For example, having to register for a Zoom meeting is highly irregular and it's not welcoming to the public. Having a lottery for the opportunity to comment at a hearing is limiting public participation. Commenters must disclose employment, investment, and lobbying ties. Some do, some don't. Some have obvious economic interests, and the weight of those comments should be discounted based on that interest. The public lands, the public interest, and the public are your constituents. People commenting should always be sworn on oath to support truthfulness. Now, as to the moratorium, I strongly support reinstatement of the lease moratorium and environmental review that was improperly ended by the prior administration, and that stopped the ongoing process that would inform your agency's decision. I also strongly support the need to terminate the improperly reinstated Twin Metals leases. Mining and exploration is destructive, and it is the antithesis of preservation. It is not a matter of questions, as was stated in your presentation. It is that the unacceptable impacts of leasing, mining, and exploration must be acknowledged, and mining leasing must cease. The moratorium is necessary to continue this review process. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today.
Carol, we appreciate your comments. Mark Bauman, we'll give you the virtual mic next, and you'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Wooten. I assume you can hear me?
We can hear you, thanks.
Great. Good afternoon to you all, especially the panelists. My name is Mark Bauman. I am a member of the public, and I am not lobbying for any organization other than the public. I really appreciate the opportunity today to provide comments to you about the proposed withdrawal of mineral and geothermal leasing from the Rainy River watershed in the Superior National Forest. I strongly support the proposal. I am a born and raised Minnesotan. In fact, I grew up in Ely, Minnesota. During my early teen years, the BWCAW came into being with the passage of the 1964 Wilderness Act that created the National Wilderness Preservation System, including the BWCA, and the subsequent BWCAW Act in 1978. I bought my first canoe at 14 years of age with paper route money from the Canadian Waters Outfitters in Ely, Minnesota. It was an 85-pound Grumman. That was over 50 years ago. I have rarely missed a year of canoeing the BWCAW with my friends and family, and with the exception of the 4 years that I was serving in the United States Air Force. Seeing how much cleaner the water is, how much lower the noise level is and how natural the environment is since the BWCAW law's establishment is absolutely extraordinary. It's been fantastic to experience this metamorphosis. You know, growing up on the Iron Range, I saw the devastation that the underground and open pit iron ore mines did to not only the landscape, but to the soil and water environment. And I saw and felt the numerous economic downturns of the boom and bust cycle of mining due to union strikes in the mines and eventually the closing of many mines. Many of the towns in northeastern Minnesota had to learn how to survive without mines, and they generally have and continue to do so. So I disagree with those who oppose the proposal. I've heard them using coined phrases such as safe, modern mining, trust the science, manage the risk, etc. Has there ever been a safe, clean mine anywhere in the USA or even in the world? Has there ever been a case where mine tailings have not leaked into the environment at some point in time or at some level of the environment, be it land, water, or air? No, there has not been. If you want an example of safe mining and trust the science, look at Sudbury, Ontario, where the sulfur from the metal mining and smelting of nickel ore acidified the soils, rain, and lakes. So in summary, you know, when we camp in the Boundary Waters, we have a motto. We leave a little bit of extra firewood for the next canoeist that stops by the campsite we are leaving. Let's hope that the BLM, the Forest Service, and the Interior Secretary will leave a little bit of extra firewood for the next canoeist stopping by.
Thank you, Mark. We have about 10 minutes left in our meeting, so time for 3 more speakers. We'll go through our list until we have 3 speakers. Joy, your microphone is unmuted and you can begin your comments.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? I'm
Yes,
Joy
we can hear you.
Anderson. Thank you. I'm Joy Anderson. I'm a senior staff attorney at the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. Several opponents of the withdrawal have said over and over, trust the science and do environmental review. I absolutely agree. The science shows that copper nickel mining is too dangerous to have in Superior National Forest and next to the Boundary Waters. And for this reason, I support the withdrawal proposal. Sulfide ore mining is very different from the taconite mining that Minnesota is used to. Sulfide ore mining has a long history of causing environmental damage. There has never been a sulfide mine in the United States or Canada that has not contaminated the surrounding water sources. There's always the possibility of a catastrophic failure like that at Mount Polley in Canada just a few years ago. But even without these catastrophic failures, there is no way to prevent contamination of the water over the potentially hundreds of years that mining byproducts remain dangerous. And this is long after any mining company will have abandoned any responsibility for cleanup. The boundary waters themselves and a buffer zone around them are already protected from mining. But with what we now know about the hydrology of the region, it's not enough. Sulfide ore mining pollutes the water, the air, and the land. To the water, it creates acid mine drainage, and it includes toxic pollutants such as arsenic, mercury, manganese, nickel, cadmium, and chromium. Particularly of concern is sulfate, which leads to increases of methylmercury and the sulfide that affects a lot of aquatic life, including wild rice. For the air, mines create particulate matter that causes lung and heart disease, and that can settle and acidify the soil. On the land, these pollutants are devastating to aquatic and terrestrial habitats and the life within them. Lots of opponents of the withdrawal are saying that the minerals in Minnesota are needed for green energy. But there are many sources for these minerals, and we should not accept badly sited or polluting mines. And we don't need to. We can expand existing mines, especially copper mines, where environmental effects have already happened and there's not a lot of opportunity for more effects. And we can recycle a lot of these materials, particularly copper. There's a lot of opportunity for recycling the copper that we have. And now there's no shortage of copper right now. We don't need to be digging in this place to have a mine here.
20 seconds.
Thanks. Minnesota's mining rules are not always better than other places. They're untested and they have many loopholes. Brazil and Chile, for example, have both banned a certain type of dangerous mine tailings dam that is allowed in Minnesota. We need to make a good decision about where mines should be allowed, and next to the boundary waters is not it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. We'll go to our next slide. Our next 5 speakers, we have 2 more speakers. So we'll go through this list. If you're on, please raise your hand. And you can, if you're joining by phone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Glenda Valdez, James Ari, Ryan Sistad, Lawson Curtis, Marie Smith. And we'll give Glenda 30 seconds to begin speaking. Turn on our timer, and Glenda, you'll have 30 seconds. All right, we'll go to our next speaker, James. We've given you the virtual microphone. Go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. My name is James Agri. I live in Minneapolis. I'm a native Minnesotan. I'd like to thank all of you for the opportunity to express my opinion on this very important matter. I am a retired physician, and I am only lobbying for the health and wellness of all of us people. I strongly support the 20-year withdrawal of the mining proposal. Before such mining can proceed, we need to have scientific evidence that such mining can be performed safely, even decades after the mining operation has ceased. We need to have evidence that copper sulfide mines can safely and without pollution function in aquatic environments, such as the BWCA. My understanding is that there is no such mine showing that this can be done safely without polluting. Polluting the BWCA and the Rainy River watershed will be irreversible. Once polluted, we cannot regain the pristine environment. I have paddled the BWCA for the past 60 years. My first trip was as a Boy Scout out of Charlie Sumner's canoe base on Moose Lake near Ely, Minnesota. The peace and tranquility of the wilderness cannot be duplicated elsewhere. Being in that environment can help with mental rejuvenation. We need this wilderness to be preserved for all of us, for generations to come. The BWCA, Rainy River watershed, and Quetico are national and international treasures. They need to be protected. We need to have a thorough evaluation of such mining proposals with no shortcuts to determine whether such mining can really safely be performed in the environment where it's located. To my understanding, we do not have evidence of safety of such mines in areas such as the BWCA. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And Ryan, you will be our last speaker in the public comment period today. Ryan, we'll give you the virtual microphone and you'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Ryan Sistad. I'm the executive director of Better in Our Backyard out of Duluth, Minnesota, and I strongly oppose the U.S. Forest Service taking any action to pursue the withdrawal of lands and minerals in northeastern Minnesota from future leasing, exploration, and potential development. Since many who have submitted comments on this are not from the region, I think it's worth mentioning that over the past 40 years, communities on the Iron Range have experienced significant drops in population, including Ely, a community that has seen its population increase by over 30% in the past 40 years. Imposing a 20-year moratorium on mining will do nothing in creating new opportunities for community members on the Iron Range, and it would contradict the Biden administration's goals to shore up domestic supply chains of minerals critical to the renewable energy industry, while also eliminating opportunities for men and women in the region that work in the union building trades. For over 130 years, Mining has sustained communities in Northeast Minnesota, but unfortunately, many outside the region that oppose mining refuse to recognize this. It doesn't take much brain power to understand that the majority of those that live in Northeastern Minnesota support new mining projects and mineral exploration because they know that they can responsibly mine copper, nickel while protecting the environment the same way that they do with iron mining every day. Ironically enough, many who support a 20-year moratorium also claim to be climate change activists. My question to them is, where do you want to get metals critical to the renewable energy industry from? Should we continue to source much of our metals from overseas in places like China or the Democratic Republic of Congo, where unethical companies contribute to the exploitation of child labor or ecological destruction? We should be working to make sure that we can produce these minerals here at home, where we know that we can protect the environment and create good paying jobs in the process in a region that desperately needs it. Thank you for taking the time to hear my comment.
Thank you, Ryan. And thanks to everyone who commented today and everyone who is interested. And I did want to share as we close out our comment period that even though the comment period is over, there are still opportunities to comment at future meetings, but also in writing. Stephanie and Shree, is there anything you want to add to close us out?
Yeah, so I would just like to say thank you to everyone who commented and everyone who joined today. We really appreciate your time and the time you took to prepare your comments. Thank you.
And I would just emphasize, thank you for being here today. There are additional meetings if you would like to join those and try to provide verbal comments, but written comments submitted through the website that's been shared receive the same attention as any of these comments in the meeting. So you can always submit that way as well. Thank you.
Thank you both for joining me on screen. Today is the first of 3 public meetings that we have scheduled. We appreciate your participation and your knowledge of the area. It's critical in making an informed decision on the proposed withdrawal. Thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule to join us. If you would like to submit written comments, you may do so through email and mail at the addresses presented on the slide. As a friendly reminder, the public comment period is open until January 19th, 2022. For those joining us by phone, the email address for comments is blm_es_lands@blm.gov. The mailing address is F. Radford, BLM Eastern States Office, 5275 Leesburg Pike, Falls Church, Virginia, 22014. You can find more information on this project and about commenting in the quick link section on the right-hand side of the Superior National Forest homepage at fs.usda.gov/main/superior/home. We'll leave information about the public comment period up for a moment while folks leave the meeting in case you need to copy it down. Thank you and have a good afternoon.